we are back. And
A dinosaur story. I'm sorry, I flagrantly ripped that off from another podcast from back when.
I couldn't even make out what you said. What did you just say? Something about dinosaurs?
Yeah, you said we're back, and I said a dinosaur story.
Oh.
Remember that movie, everyone?
I've been trying to forget that movie. Just because.
Okay.
Which movie exactly?
We're back, a dinosaur story.
I actually like that one. I have a huge soft spot, especially since Lisa Simpson, the voice of Lisa Simpson, voices one of the characters.
She is, and that is true, yes. Like, I know nothing about it, except I grew up playing a crappy licensed game on the SNES based on it.
The
foreign.
The Genesis version is marginally better, but not by much. You can easily skip any version of that game.
Good.
I'll be completely honest, I've never seen the movie.
Okay, fair enough.
So, anyway, we are back. And I see Great White North is here. So, how's it going, Jay?
What up?
So, as you can see, this is an unusual Dyer's Place tonight because we have Snarb with us.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
That we do.
Yep.
An interloper, if you will.
Yeah, showing up as, what the heck is his name from...
Jake, I believe.
Yeah, Jake from Totally Rad.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. That's what we got going tonight. Snarb here to talk with us about PC games and their console ports. So...
Yes, specifically very classic games. We've got an interesting mix here, but I'm sure you'll go into that in just a moment.
Oh, of course. So, anyway. Just so you know, if my voice sounds off tonight, it's because I've been sick for the past few days. So, it's just one of those things that happens every so often. But you all know this because you all get sick too, so.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I still have a very minor vestige of a cough that I think I've had for like 6-7 weeks now. The worst is over, but it's not 100% going away, so I don't know.
Yeah, my voice just has a tendency to act weird from time to time while I'm sick. But that's cool, Jay. You're talking to your girlfriend and lurking? By all means.
Cool.
So, rather than launch right into a discussion about something, how have you guys been?
Recovering from a mild head injury.
Ouch.
Hit the sharp end of the cabinet pretty dang hard. No concussion, fortunately, but lots of headaches.
I remember you mentioning that.
That sucks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see Sharon's popped in.
Not really a lot to note on my end, except, I guess I'm somewhat disillusioned with the current state of gaming, so one more point towards virtual cavemanism, I guess.
Woohoo!
Cheap pop for Rob, but I figure I'd mention that.
Hey, those books are coming this year. I swear to God, we're working on this stuff right now.
Good timing. Very good timing.
Yes.
Yes.
I've seen the first video we're going to put up on the Kickstarter, and it's looking pretty good so far. We just got to iron some stuff out for it.
Oh, wow. That's really neat.
Yep. So, yeah, take my word. They will be coming this year.
Nice.
So, anyway. Let's see. So, we got Jay lurking, and Sharon's kicking around. And let's see if anyone else shows up before we start in depth about what we're going to talk about. Snarb has entered the chat. But
Snarb has entered the chat with us. He is also on the phone with you.
Yes. Anyway, I think just for that, I'm going to do this. Oh, anyway. Hey, who pulled the air horn?
That was mine. That was me.
Weirdly, I cannot hear any of that right now. I'm using the browser Discord, but it's there in spirit. I'm sure I will hear it, like psychically at some point, so.
Oh, undoubtedly. All right, so let's see. Let me make a couple of adjustments over here so I've got room to see stuff. There we go. Oh, what the hell? Let's just kick things off then. I think we should talk about probably the oldest one on here first, which would be Montezuma's Revenge.
I hear that and I always think of Strong Bad saying, Choco Zuma's Revenge.
Oh, it looks
This is all
sinful.
fat free, right?
Shut up, lady. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you guys both know Montezuma's Revenge started out on I think it was the Atari 400 or 800, one of the Atari computers. And then it subsequently got ported to everything.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. I thought it started in the Commodore 64, but no, it dates back even farther than that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it showed up on the 2600, the ColecoVision, the Master System, and even as recently as 2021, I'm pretty sure it was, the NES. And I think that version's on the Switch, too.
Well, was it even on those, like, British home computers that nobody likes talking about whenever they're forced to recount ports of games?
I have absolutely no idea. I haven't checked.
Okay. It wasn't on the Amstrad or the Acorn or whatever, so never mind.
The ZX Spectrum, I think is what it was.
No, not that either. Oh, just the Commodore of those. So.
Yes. All right. Well, I know a lot about the ports of the game. I didn't get to play the original computer version until years and years later. But Snarb is our resident PC expert. What about you? Have you played much of this at all?
I have not played any version of Montezuma's Revenge. It was always a game I was curious about since I used to see it in the old hand-me-down comics I would get from time to time from comic book stores and such, because it was heavily advertised in comics, and it looked like such an interesting game, but obviously at that point I couldn't find much information on it because, no internet, and it was well past that game's time. I am more familiar with its PC-exclusive sequel, Montezuma's Return, which is a very bizarre first-person platformer with fisticuff combat, but that's a different story for a different time.
Yeah.
What? A Punch-Out? Wow, really?
Kind of. It's like a platformer. Your combat is, you like punching things and kicking things. You might even get a whip or some other sort of item. It's a very fascinating game. If you can, I'd probably look for a long play of it or something. It's very hard to get running on modern computers because it uses 3D effects, graphics, which if you're familiar with that, you would know why it's almost impossible to run now.
And does it have like a Windows 95 launcher and so on?
Yes, it is a Windows 95 era too. It probably has a launcher among other issues, but unfortunately, I think the original game is actually included with it. I might have actually played it briefly in that, but I know it's a platformer and you gather treasures in massive pyramids, so...
Yeah, you're basically trying to find your way to the end of the pyramid.
All right.
As I recall, the original Montezuma's Revenge only had like 4 pyramids, and later ports actually got it up to around 8. So, being more familiar with the ports than the original, I can tell you that the 2600 game was a pretty good conversion, given the limitations of the system. And the ColecoVision one I played for a bit, and that's even closer to the original. The Master System version, which came out around 88, 89 or so, that was like they took the entire game and revamped it. Because everything has been improved in that. There's music for one thing. And, he used to be a little blocky dude with a hat and stuff, but now he's like a tall, skinny dude with a hat and stuff. The interesting thing about that one is it not only was it a U.S. exclusive, but it's one of the few games that requires you have the Sega Master System controller to run it on a Genesis, if you're playing it through the Power-Based converter.
Oh.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. There were a few of them like that. Alien Syndrome was another one. Where in the World's Carmen San and there's another big one. Can't think of what it was off the top of my head. No, it wasn't Zillion. I could check real quick, actually.
Okay.
And while you're checking that, I looked this up. Apparently, there has been a recent revamp or remake with improved graphics released for Steam and GOG.
Oh, really?
Very interesting looking version. Yeah, they upgrade the blocky guy into a sombrero-wearing guy with a poncho, it looks like. And he also has sandals now rather than being barefoot.
That almost sounds like the NES version that they did, because that was a recent port, and if I remember correctly, the original designer of the game came back to port it.
Curious.
Wow.
Yeah. So let me see something here. I think he's been involved to a degree with all the other ports.
While you're looking that up, I did want to note that I was wrong. There was actually a ZX Spectrum version, except that for some reason it was released under a different name. That version was called Panama Joe, for God knows why.
Panama Joe is the original version of the character, if I recall correctly.
Oh, okay.
Because back in the day, it was always Montezuma's Revenge starring Panama Joe.
Oh, well, I guess you're not playing as Montezuma, so that's a good point.
No, but what they are trying to do is, it was very clearly inspired by a certain globe-trotting archaeologist.
As was quite a few titles back in the day. I should note that my exposure is pretty much almost entirely on the SMS version, but I do think that is just a real cool port. Would you... I mean, I guess it's a little unfair to weight it against less powerful computers, but would you say the SMS one is more or less the definitive version, arguably?
I think it's the prettiest version. That's really about it. It plays almost identically to the other ones.
Yeah, cool. Maybe a little faster.
I mean, the PC remake, which actually has a Switch port as well, might be the definitive version. There's also, I realized, I was looking this up as well, the sequel, Montezuma's Return, actually had a Game Boy and Game Boy Color port, and it looks more truer to the original game, so I'll have to give that a poke at some point.
Yeah, that one I've seen, but I haven't really played it all. Okay, and here's all the games I can find off the top of not off the top of my head, but what I was finding that required the Master System controller on the Genesis. Alien Syndrome, Bomber Raid, Montezuma's Revenge, Penguin Land, Where in the World's Carmen Sandiego, and Wonder Boy and Monsterland.
Ah, Wonder Boy. That'd check out then.
Yeah, all the other Wonder Boys run just fine with the Genesis controller, except for Monsterland.
It is weird. You'd think that the Dragon's Trap would have more trouble since it's more advanced, but
no, it actually worked out better. I think there's a couple more. I just don't know what they are off the top of my head. Of course, if you wanted to get into Master System incompatibilities with the Genesis, well, we're not. We'll save it for another time.
Yeah,
because there are a few more oddities here and there. So
as for Revenge itself, I do think that the SMS game looks really neat, but I must admit I never got very far in it. It's not an easy game, as you can probably guess.
No. However, I think it actually has a definitive ending.
Ooh. Other versions don't, somehow?
They might, but I've never gotten to the end myself, so I couldn't tell you.
Okay,
but
so
I know
some old guy just doesn't say no when he reached the end, I guess.
No, I don't think that happens. I think you actually find Montezuma's treasure.
Oh, I wonder if we should have put Impossible Mission on our list.
I kind of hate Impossible Mission, to tell you the truth.
Honestly, I'm not a big fan of it either.
Yeah. So
it has ambition, I just have no fucking idea what I'm doing in it.
Yeah, and it did inspire the first Zillion game, so... Yeah. Much as everyone loves to say that's like Metroid on the Master System, it's like, no, that's more like Impossible Mission on the Master System. You want Metroid, look at Cyborg Hunter.
Yeah, it is much more akin because of like the console that you have to hack and whatnot.
The computers, the passwords, and all this other junk.
Too cerebral for me.
Yeah, me too. All right, so I think we've pretty much run through Montezuma's Revenge, and we're only 16 minutes in. All right. Let's go to something that you would know a lot more about, Mike. Pirates.
Oh, yeah, not wrong Paez, I'm afraid.
Oh, yeah, wrong Pirates there, sir.
Yeah, we're not talking about the arcade shoot-'em-up, which is actually a decent, if not somewhat insensitive riff on Cabal. No, Sid Meier's Pirates, which I figure I want to wedge this one in here somewhat like last minute-ish because, I don't know, it just seems like having one Sid Meier game on here seemed like the right thing to do, and
That makes sense.
it is well, it's a game where you are a captain of a ship, and you're not necessarily a pirate, but you can play as one if you want. It's like the setup goes that you, like, you know, choose which time period you're in. You choose which country you represent, of England, France, Netherlands, or Spain, and you choose what skill you're most excellent at. The default setting that you have, i.e. English, 16, 20, 40 was, I forget what time it was, and fencing, all of that is pretty much the default easiest. So any change you make will be a bit more of a challenge, ideally, unless there's like something to be said for like healing or charm or whatever asset is most desired.
Hey, Mike,
And
as an aside, you'd probably know this more than I would. You want to fill Sharon in on just who Sid Meier is?
Sid Meier is a notably what would I say? Influential game designer, the creator of several notable computer games, which the big ones had his name on them, and you know, that's a fair deal of branding, I'd say, because, like, I mean, besides Pirates, his most famous games would probably be Railroad Tycoon, Alpha Centauri, and the big one is probably Civilization. He's the brainchild of the Civilization series, which is sort of like the de facto sort of worlds building sim. I admittedly have never touched a single Civilization in my life. They seem like cool games, but they're a little bit too complicated for me. However, I do find a lot of amusement in the infamous glitch that made India's leader, who looks a lot like Mahatma Gandhi, to be rather gleeful about starting nuclear war if you cross him the wrong way. So,
Now,
yes, his benevolence factor actually, there was like an integer underflow, I believe. They set it too low, so it actually spilled over to the maximum aggression value.
yeah. That's
Wow.
pretty great.
Now, I admit that until I got older, I would occasionally confuse Sid Meier with Sid Mead.
Oh, the artist dude.
I can understand that given the naming similarities.
That and the fact that there was a Sid Mead game for the TurboGrafx.
Yeah, Terraforming. I don't think I really played that one much.
It's a pretty cool little shooter.
Yeah, I should get on it more, but let me just check something. Pirates was actually the first game that Meyer felt bold enough to put his name on, and, you know, I can't argue it because this is a pretty damn rich and involved game, which I couldn't tell you if it's still the definitive game about swashbuckling and, you know, colonial trade in the Caribbean or whatnot.
Guybrush Threepwood has entered the chat.
I mean, Monkey Island's a very different beast, to say the least, but that is a valid pirate game, I'll give you that. I know there's that one called Sea of Thieves that's apparently pretty good. I don't know much about it. There's also Assassin's Creed 4, apparently. Yeah. Ubisoft also released... Yeah. It's just such infuriating, because all they had to do was make AC4 again with the serial numbers filed off when Ubisoft made Skull and Bones, and they didn't do that, and the game's apparently really lame, and it's already failing, and it's a very typically Ubisoft move. But I digress horribly.
Yeah, you're getting way out of my wheelhouse.
Wait.
But Mike, you must understand, it is a quadruple A game, so naturally it's just too far advanced for our primitive minds.
My primitive mind is happy playing Skull and Crossbones in the arcade, okay?
Fucking much. My God, it is just...
That one's not too bad, actually. Didn't that have an NES port?
It had an NES port, yeah.
Unlicensed one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right.
Right.
Under Tengen. That makes sense. Anyway, Sid Meier's Pirates itself, like I said, it's a... I guess I can best call it something of an adventure simulation game. you can sail around and basically just do whatever you want. Like, if you just want to explore the map, you can do that, although, if you run out of food, your crew might die and or mutiny on you, so it pays to stop into towns frequently and restock your shit. You'll frequently meet other ships out on the high seas, and, if they're not flying enemy colors, or if they're not flying the Jolly Roger, then, you can just chat to them, ask them if there's any news to know about, any recent events that would be helpful to your adventuring. But inevitably you will come across enemies, whether they're political countries that you're opposed to, depending on the time period in question, or if they just are straight up pirates. So you enter into these naval combat scenarios where they're a little bit slow paced, but they are pretty neat, where you can just keep firing cannonballs at each other, or, and I think 99% of the time most people do this, you ram your ship into the other ship and then fight their captain in a sword duel, which I guess you could say is like a pre-Street Fighter 2 fighting game almost. I mean, it's relatively simple. It has more in common with the 1984 arcade game Great Swordsman, but even that's a little bit of a stretch. It's not even quite that complicated. And I don't know why you'd pick anything besides the rapier, because I really do think that speed wins the day, at least on the version I play. Maybe the longsword of the cutlass has some benefits, and if you beat the captain, then some of their crew joins you, and you will also get whatever they didn't throw overboard before you came around, and you can even take the ship with you. Although if you have too many ships at once, then that might be too much to manage, so it might just be better scuttle something, sell them in a shipyard when you get into a town, etc. There is a lot of stuff to do. I'm probably making this sound really involved, but there is also a loose sort of actual goal you can pursue. There are 10 quests that you can go on, like finding the silver train or finding your lost sister, etc. And you can actually declare the game over, and if you complete these 10 quests, or you can just keep on going into infinite mode if you want. So yeah, it's a very free-form game. There's a lot to do. It's just really elaborate and cool and piratey.
So let me get this straight. You've played the PC version, right?
Actually, no. I'm almost entirely familiar with the Genesis port, which is actually, furthermore, specifically a port of a re-release of the game known as Pirates Gold. Yes. I probably should have played the original PC version to research this, but the Genesis version is just really damn good as it... Hey, come on. I haven't played the PC versions of all of these, I have to admit, so I'm sorry.
Yes, and for Pirates Gold, it's a completely different version. It uses high-res graphics, and there's a version that runs in both DOS and in Win 3.1, I believe. It looks very interesting. It has mouse-controlled sword combat, as far as I can tell, whereas the Genesis version is actually kind of like a port of the Amiga version, which makes sense. It has, it has the more illustrative style rather than the almost photographic style of the newer Pirates Gold PC port.
Yes. Rob is actually familiar with a different version.
Yes, I actually remember picking it up on a whim when I was at a game store one day, probably about a dozen years ago. And it was the NES port by Ultra, a.k.a. Konami. It was actually a port of the original PC game, if I recall correctly. It was, pre-gold.
Yeah. The NES graphics seem more in line with the PC and C64 versions.
Yep, but I had some fun with that. I actually did spend a few hours playing it. And basically everything you said was pretty accurate.
Nice.
Can't tell you how many times I, would go ahead and come along broadside to an enemy ship, hoist a Jolly Roger, and have my men board it.
Nice.
And sure enough, a duel to the death with the captain. I kicked his ass. Numerous times.
I know that some captains are harder to beat than others. If your crew is kind of ailing and or he has a lot more strong men on his side, then it might be harder, but not necessarily impossible to beat him.
I think I was only put ashore once or twice.
Yes, you can lose a duel and or your ship can be destroyed, which if you don't have any other ships in reserve, this wastes time and resources until you get picked up by an errant ship and or get back on your feet. I think if you blow it in some situations, you can also be arrested, which I'm not sure if you can ever truly fully die and like your entire game gets squashed. You probably can, but I admit I haven't played too far enough to find out if you can like have a complete kill state in your quests. So
Yeah, I never found that out either. Basically, once I grew tired of it, it just kind of sat in my collection until I decided to purge it in 2016.
yes.
Yeah, it's not like it's that hard to find, though, if I really wanted it back.
That's a good point. Yeah, it is a very cool game to play, but admittedly, I probably have played it in relatively short bursts because focusing for it on the long run does seem very much involved and a little bit beyond my attention span and level of intelligence. I did, however, I think last time I played it, I actually found the silver train completely by accident. I'm like, oh shit, I did a quest. Cool. So that can happen.
Have you ever considered piracy? You'd make a wonderful Dread Pirate, Roberts.
Indeed.
Well, so yeah, that's Pirates. Snarb, you got anything else you want to add about that?
I'm not really familiar with the classic versions of the game outside of just doing quick research. It was a game I always saw for rent, and I just was curious about it, but never picked it up. However, I have seen and played a little bit more of the Xbox 360, or no, classic Xbox port of the newer remake from the 2000s. And that one's really interesting because it adds more in-depth mini games. Like there's a stealth mission when you're infiltrating towns. You actually have to court, ladies. And there's a mini game there where you have to dance properly, or else you're a total lamazoid.
I know you
there's
can.
There's actually a dancing rhythm game.
Oh my god, that's kind of amazing. I know that you can court ladies. Like sometimes, like the governor offers you his daughter's hand in marriage or whatever. But I'm pretty sure the older versions didn't have you, just dance for it. So
yes, there's the full 3D map. I think you can actually do. There's actually combat sometimes, ship-to-ship combat, other kind of stuff like that. But otherwise, it maintains a lot of the same sim elements. I think you can also run your own towns, or you can take over towns and such, and like run out, manage them to some degree. I forget what all the differences are, but it definitely just seemed like a pretty good, faithful remake of the original.
Yeah, I am kind of amazed because from a distance, it almost looks like one of those like sort of remakes in name only that you kind of sort of get in the sort of weird days of the early Xbox Live Arcade, like a few games like that, if that description makes sense. However, by all accounts, I hear that the 2000s version of Pirates is actually pretty damn good and faithful to the original. I'd like to check it out someday. So
nice.
Oh, it did have an Xbox 360 port, so maybe that. I thought it was the original Xbox, but I see here it actually did later get ported to the Wii and the Xbox 360. No PS3 port, but yeah.
Nice.
Well, it's probably not something.
Wait, it might be a back compat title. It might be back compat, actually. I'm looking into this further.
It's probably not something I'll ever really play again. When I want to get my pirate fix these days, I either play Captain Silver or Skull and Crossbones. So.
I still need to beat Captain Silver. It's tough.
You just do it with the castrated U.S. Master System version, and you'll be just fine.
Alright, if you say so.
It's super easy. When you actually get the European or Japanese original, then it gets hard.
Well, yeah, I guess I can consider the nerfed version a practice run, but
pretty much. Okay. That's like the training game. Although, I will admit, the U.S. version is a much cooler cover than the other two.
Really? The U.S. actually got the better cover. That doesn't happen often.
No, the European and the Japanese versions each share the same cover. It's very cartoony. And it's like, your whatever the hero's name is, I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Jack something or other? Oh, yeah. Jim, apparently.
Yeah, Jim. Basically, he's standing there with his sword. He's surrounded by pirates. There's birds flying and whatnot. The American version, not only does he not look cartoony, but he's actually on top of a mast dueling with Captain Silver Skeleton.
Ooh, hello.
Yeah, much cooler looking.
Hey, you're right. That is actually pretty rad.
So, all right. But yeah, I had fun with Pirates when I had it. And yeah, you never know. I might fire it up again one day.
Oh, yes, I had to get one.
So, let's say we take a couple minutes for an aside. All right. So, who here is familiar with the Killing Game Show, a.k.a. Fatal Rewind?
Quite familiar with the Genesis version. I used to rent it all the time, and I don't think I could ever get past either the second or third area, when the tiles change again. It's a pretty brutal little game.
Oh, yeah. They called it the Killing Game Show for a reason. I remember there was, back in about 90 or so, there was a local Walden Books. I think they had a software, etc. in the back. And they actually had that running in demo mode on the Amiga back there. So
wow.
I would stand there and watch it, and it's like, this looks really freaking cool. Of course, then I played the Genesis port later, and it's like, yeah, not as cool as I thought. Way too hard. But
oh yeah, it's brutal.
Having actually played the Amiga version since, they're almost identical. There's very little difference. Aside from the fact that you can actually have both music and sound effects in the Genesis game, and not so in the Amiga.
The Genesis version's missing a few of the levels, too. I think it's missing at least 2 of the worlds, and they've been reshuffled. There was one point where I was comparing long plays of both games, because I was trying to practice and get better at the Genesis version for a while, and I was curious how it differed from the Amiga, and yeah, there's actually some differences there in terms of level structure.
This actually does not surprise me, because... to be honest, in either version, I barely made a dent in it. So I never got to see all this stuff get changed around. But that does make perfect sense. They would do something like that.
Yeah. Offhand, I hear the Killing Game Show, and I immediately envision it just straight up being the Running Man, or that one part from Flashback that's also probably inspired by the Running Man, Smash TV, etc. And yet, for some reason in this game, you're controlling some sort of Ed 209-like mech thingy.
Except he's got like a weird skull and claws.
Yeah, it's a very odd design. It almost seems like a creature, but it's not. Is this like one of those cases where like your guy is like horribly fused into the cockpit and he's neither a machine nor man or something?
Yes, actually, that is the backstory. I think it's either your brain or they actually chop off all your limbs and put you in there first.
Oh my fuck. Of course I fucking knew, like, all these bio-mech horror thingies always turn out like that. Bastards.
Well, Jay, if you've never heard of it, just look up the Genesis game Fatal Rewind and give it a shot.
Yeah.
Wait, there's one other thing to note about the Japanese version. Actually has the full FMV intro from the Amiga version. That's actually pretty cool that they were able to sneak that in there for that version. I can't say if it differs in any other way.
I feel like we got rooked again.
Of course we did.
Especially with those Cyanosis games.
Oh yeah.
If I'm reading this right, I don't see anything about limbs getting chopped off, but the contestant's skin is removed and they're placed in the robot. So that's also fantastic, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it was something like that. It's quite horrific.
Wasn't the Japanese version actually, didn't it retain the original title?
Yes, it's still called the Killing Game Show in Japan.
Yeah.
Now, when I hear Fatal Rewind, does that suggest that there's some sort of, like, if you die, you get to go back, 10 seconds to where you blew it sort of feature? Or is there not something like that?
I don't recall that.
But it works differently. It's more like a Fatal Fast Forward. What happens is that you can actually let the game automatically replay up to the point that you totally biffed it, so...
Okay. So that name is semi-accurate then. I admit my memories of this one are more vague. I just remember galumphing around a map in my bastard beast machine, and I don't think I lasted very long.
Fighting all sort of weird geometric shapes that come flying out.
Yeah, I'm looking at footage, and that does seem quite familiar. You do get some pretty cool armaments if you know where to find them. There are actually quite a few weapons that you can grab. You know, lasers, missiles, like mines, a Gradius-esque like tail gun, etc.
You keep saying ETC. I don't think that means what you think it means.
Okay, well, etc. then, if you want me to be technical. But
Now, if I could find a rhyme to go with etc., I'd do a physic, but I can't.
Does anybody want a peanut?
And Jay, if you want to see that FMV opening without just looking up a long play of the Amiga version or something, look for the Mega Drive version of Fatal Rewind, the Killing Game Show. So, yeah, interesting little game. I was more impressed with it back when I saw it in demo mode. Playing it was a totally different story.
Yes, that's the Amiga game experience.
Yes, it is.
I mean, among Amiga games, I do certainly like the style of this one, and I think with
it was your style at the time.
I think with a little bit more polish, it could have been pretty cool, but I hate to put it this way since it sounds a little disparaging, but it has what I call European map syndrome, EMS, and it's this, you know, these big, like, sprawling stages where direction isn't exactly clear and all, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I had to give up on a few long plays years ago when I first started trying to get into the game because I got lost just watching someone else play it, and that's a bad time.
Oof, yeah. No, this does look daunting. It's a cool idea. I do like the aesthetics. It's just the gameplay needs some ironing out. That said, I will say this. Make of what you will with this statement, but this game kind of reminds me of a better Blaster Master 2.
Not really.
No. No,
Okay.
sorry, Mike. You lose.
Hooray!
All right. Why don't we move on to a little more of a straightforward Psygnosis game? You know, one that's not so map heavy, and you actually basically do have to go in a straight line, sort of.
Ah, yes.
Let's talk Shadow of the Beast.
Great music in that one. David Whittaker was the composer, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That sounds right. Yeah.
I can tell you, I remember seeing previews for that in like Video Games and Computer Entertainment magazine, and just being wowed at how detailed it looked.
Detail indeed. Shadow of the Beast is a fantastic fever dream of a game, if I do say so.
Although not as much of a fever dream as Weird Dreams.
Not quite that weird, no, but like weird enough. You seem to be in this sort of like, you know, distant fantasy world that doesn't quite look like Earth, and it mostly looks like it could be out of like, you know, a medieval fantasy book. Except for some reason there are zeppelins flying in the background.
Yeah.
And that
It's very 70s, 80s sci fantasy heavy metal magazine kind of thing going on, which is pretty dang sweet that they made a game like that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's incredibly Roger Deanish, and he actually did the artwork to the cover, didn't he?
I think he did.
Yeah, he's involved in some capacity. Yes.
If I'd been more prepared, I had pictures of the stuff to throw up, but I don't.
Yes.
Oh, well.
And in this game, you play as a fellow named Arbron, who has been cursed into a beast form that looks like a caveman vampire. And not the pretty vampire eater, like the ugly, like, beast bat with weird-ass head and fangs vampire.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
At least that's always how I interpreted the sprite. Maybe he's supposed to be more like a dog, but I don't know exactly.
Whatever, he looks cool.
He does look neat, yes. And you just basically have to punch your way through a lot of also weird monsters until you beat what spoilers, apparently you need to defeat a giant troll's foot to win, which is a weird way to end the game, but good luck
Yes,
getting there.
But see, that's where the
it's
game
one of the
starts to fall
servants.
apart. Wait, what'd you say, Snarb?
I was saying, trying to remember. I think that's actually like the first general or whatever of the big bad who you don't fight until I believe the third game. In fact, like there's another general or lieutenant in between there that you fight in two.
Yes, this is a trilogy, as a matter of fact. The first game is best known, but... Well, I don't want to speak about sequels just yet, but...
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say, when it comes to punching things, this is where Shadow of the Beast starts to fall apart. Hit detection is very poor in that game.
It's not only wonky, but you need, like, on-the-nail timing to hit anything, because there are a lot of things that are just kind of rushing at you quickly, and your range is not excellent for the most part.
No.
Like, most things that you hit at least fall in one punch, but...
There's a lot of them.
Yes, there are a lot of enemies. There are also quite a few hazards to deal with in any given stage, like giant bouncing eyeballs or these weird massive corpse hands that pop out of the ground, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Again, weird, creepy, awesome art design, as Psygnosis had in quite a few of their games, and a really rad soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
I love this game much more for its aesthetics than I do its actual gameplay. I feel its gameplay had potential. It just needed a lot more ironing out.
Yeah, now here's the thing.
Yes.
I've played so many different ports of Shadow of the Beast, and all of them suffer from that same defect.
Bogus.
The best one out of the bunch, I would say, would be the Mega Drive version.
Yeah.
It actually improves that a bit. I think it gives you a little more health. And
Yeah.
Yes. The Japanese Mega Drive version has a health select option, as well as I think it might even have a difficulty selector that makes things slightly easier. It's very nice.
I think you're right.
Oh, that's nice.
It's one of the few Mega Drive games that I got in recent years, complete in box for a mere pittance, basically.
I can imagine it not being in too much high demand, but even I do remember the Western version on the Genesis
was
still
the first one I had.
It was still somewhat easier than the original Amiga. I actually did manage to play the original Amiga version, and it pulls a really bullshit thing that even the Genesis version is not so mean to do. It can give you potions that take away some of your life, like fucking Super Mario Brothers: The Lost Levels.
Yeah, that's a load of crap.
It really is. The Genesis version was not that cruel.
It's like, as if you're not getting beat up enough to go ahead and lose so much life, they throw poison at you. Great. What is it, sort of Sodan?
Oh god, don't even start.
You can take 12 hits, which by all accounts seems like a lot of punishment. You'll wish you had more in pretty damn short order. I'll say that.
Yeah, like maybe 60 or 100.
Yeah, and like we said, you do get life potions here and there, but
they're few
the
and far
Amiga version
between.
is less generous with them, and like I said, it has a few nega potions, which totally fucking sucks. Yeah, if you do want to play this and maybe actually seriously beat it, then yeah, do go for the Mega Drive version. It's still not a walk in the park, but it is more accommodating. Also, I remember the Mega Drive version actually changed Arbron's sprite. It made the head look more oblong, as I remember. He looked different somehow, like a little more werewolfy, if that makes sense.
I think they remove his armor too. He's less armored. I'm trying to remember what other differences they did. They retouched the graphics. It looks very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not true to the original, it's definitely an improvement.
Tell you what I'd like to see someone do with that Mega Drive version. Have you heard about the MD Plus hacks?
Yes.
Explain.
Okay, you remember the Super NES's MSU one? Where you could actually have, any other kind of music playing behind it?
Oh yeah, I kind of do.
Well, that's just the Genesis equivalent is MD Plus.
Okay.
So what they need to do is hack that to where you can actually play the original Amiga soundtrack with it.
That would be great. Yes.
That
Yeah,
would
that's
be
right.
nice, yes.
That's right. That's what you did with Strider. That's right. I remember now.
Yeah, I did do a little experimenting with Strider. It came out pretty well, too. Anyway, that would be my ideal thing for Shadow of the Beast right there. But, I mean, I played the Master System port. I owned the Genesis port for a brief time a while back because it was like, oh, cool, that really cool game I saw in the magazines on the Genesis. I can play it now. What the heck is this? You know?
Might I brag and admit I actually did beat the Western Genesis version once.
It does control better than the Amiga version. The Amiga version is shockingly stiff. And there's this funny thing you could do with your punches where you can actually hold out your fist. Enemies can't run into it. You just don't. It's like you're punching them and then you decide just to hold your fist out. It's like, hello. It doesn't hurt you.
I remember you can do that, but I think holding it out is useless in some versions.
Yes, it is.
I only played the Amiga version for the first time over the past month, so...
It was brutal, wasn't it?
Yes, very brutal, but, man, that soundtrack.
Yep. I know it also, weirdly enough, got a port to the Master System. It also got one for the PC Engine CD, bizarrely enough.
Yeah, that one... I don't like the soundtrack to that at all.
Oh, man, that's a shame. It also got a weird SNES version, which is apparently a kind of altered port called Super Shadow of the Beast.
It was canceled, or I don't know what the deal with that is, how it ever got released, but... Yes, it is essentially a remixed, arranged, completely reinterpreted version of the game. It's better in some ways, worse in others. They reshuffle the music so that certain songs don't play where they're supposed to. I can't remember if the Underworld theme from like Under the Tree ever plays anywhere in that version, and it's kind of a bummer.
That's the best one.
I know.
It's my favorite piece of music from that game.
Apparently, Arbron gets spoilers. Arbron gets a gun at some point.
Yeah.
Because why not? Actually, the penultimate stage has him with a gun and a jetpack, too, so... tech.
That's one of the best parts in the game.
It is really neat, yeah, but you have to go through the fucking bullshit castle segment to get there, which is probably the worst part of the game, so...
Yeah, I've watched a couple long plays of the Genesis version, just to see what I never got to see.
Yeah, some pretty interesting stuff, to say the least, but...
Now, to touch on the sequels briefly. Now, I know Shadow of the Beast 2 has kind of a mixed reaction from people.
Oh, it fucking sucks. I hate it.
Okay, that's not so much mixed, more like, this sucks.
Okay, that's a little... Go ahead, Snarb.
It's okay. Imagine a Sierra Adventure game masquerading as an action platformer.
I can't imagine
You can actually lose the game entirely if you go to the right instead of going to the left and rescuing some random dude. Like, if that guy dies, you cannot beat the game, and that's within the first 5 seconds of the game.
Wow.
Honestly, Shadow 2 makes most of Sierra's library look like, a fucking Pajama Sam game. That's not to put down Pajama Sam, it's just... Okay, that did sound disparaging. I like Pajama Sam. It's just that, I say it's easier. That's what I'm trying to say, very clumsily.
Pajama Sam?
Yeah, it's a series of kids' adventure games. And
never heard of them until now.
Oh, have you heard of Putt?
They also did Putt Putt, I believe, the same company, and Sly Fox, I think, maybe?
Yeah.
That might have been a different one. I can't remember.
Putt Putt I'm at least kind of familiar with.
Cool. But, I do like Shadow of the Beast 2's sort of darkish atmosphere. It's even darker than the first game. It seems like it has a few neat ideas, and also I kind of like that Arbron is now a Neanderthal with a ball and chain. Like, he's semi-evolved out of being a beast, but not fully.
Yes, his curse has been slowly repealed. The Master System version, to go back to Shadow of the Beast, actually has him fully transform at the ending and has a proper full ending rather than just a screen that says congratulations. It's actually really neat, even if that version has some deficiencies.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, Bruno has entered the chat.
Hey, VL, what up? I want to like Shadow 2. It does seem pretty ambitious, all considered, and I think with a bit more refinement and a lot less evil, it could have been a neat game, but as it stands, I kind of consider it the dark sheep of the series. It's just so...
Yeah.
So I just say the fuck out of it, play through it.
As Jay said, that's quite a curveball in the first few seconds.
Yeah, it's... Wow, one of the...
Did you go to the right? Reset the game. Did you not rescue the man? Restart the game. Did the weird monster thing cut the rope? Restart the game.
Oh, hey,
yeah,
Brandon.
without an FAQ, it comes with a cockload of trial and error. And even when you do know what to do, you have to do it perfectly all in one sitting. So,
all right.
Not recommended.
Hang on for 1 sec. Just so you know, Brandon, you've missed just us talking about a few different games. We're right now wrapping up Shadow of the Beast. And we're going to go from there. So, let's talk briefly about 3. That never got ported to anything, did it?
It did not. No,
Nope.
It is a pure True Blue Amiga exclusive, which sucks because I actually think it's the best of the trilogy. God damn it, we should have gotten
Well,
it.
save for the fish puzzle. There's
Okay.
actually some more puzzles that are worse than 2, but fortunately you get multiple lives. It's the first in the series to do that.
Yeah,
Really?
3 is a little bit of an odd entity. It kind of attempts to cut the difference between the first one being pure action and the second being more cerebral and heinous. So it's kind of like an action platformer puzzler, and it also has a Mega Man-esque structure where there are 4 levels, and you can choose to tackle them in any order you wish. Plus, Arbron is now a full human, and he looks like a shirtless Indiana Jones who wields a
Interesting.
boomerang shuriken. Because why not?
Yeah, he has the glaive basically almost from Kroll.
Yeah,
So
kind of.
he's like
It's a good way
Indiana
to sell
Jones
to
with the
Rob.
glaive.
Yeah, that's like mashing Rob's action figures together.
Yeah, too bad there were never any Crawl action figures.
There wasn't really
I was going to say,
Nope.
bogus. There should have been.
We got Clash of the Titans action figures, but never Crawl.
Oh, well, that's cool at least.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We got Dune action figures even.
oh yeah, right. Yeah.
you got the Dune coloring book too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you got the one of Kyle MacLachlan's Paul recently, didn't you?
That was the recent one by Super 7. No, but back in 84, 85, they actually did have a line of Dune figures.
Nice, very nice.
They didn't last
But
very
yeah.
long.
Alas. But yeah, Shadow 3, I think, was a really neat game, and even if it did have some bullshit that harkened back to 2 and was somewhat worse in some ways, I still think it's the best of this bizarre trilogy relatively, and it's really a shame we didn't get a port of it, damn it.
Yeah. Oh, well.
You have to fiddle with WinUAE's Byzantine configuration settings, or whatever the preferred way to emulate Amiga is nowadays. I don't know.
FSUAE these days, it streamlines it a little.
Good. That's the least I can ask for.
I've been able to do it with RetroArch, and that streamlines it a
Oh,
lot.
right, that does it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one streamlines it too.
Oh, yeah. But, so let's move away from Shadow of the Beast, and how about we talk some Turrican?
Yes, let's. Speaking of Amiga exclusives, this one was not, but admittedly, if you're not playing the Amiga version, you're not really playing Turrican. I know that sounds snobbish, but I don't really know how best to put it.
Well, judging by the TurboGrafx
No, you
16
don't.
port, it's true.
And how?
I tried to play the TurboGrafx 16 port recently of Turrican, and I fell asleep.
The game is really tinny, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Um,
And Sharon, not Mega Turrican, that was one of the sequels. We're talking about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
original.
And that's like the best game in the franchise besides Super Turrican 2.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Mega Turrican was the Genesis port of Turrican 3, originally for the Amiga, and by all accounts, not only is it a really dead-on port, but it's actually more colorful and arguably a little better than the original was.
It's actually, the port went the opposite way, actually. It started off as Mega Turrican and then got ported to the Amiga. It's pretty wild when you consider that.
That's
Holy
impressive.
shit! I never knew that. That's actually really cool, and that makes sense that the Genesis one feels better as a result. But anyway, we're talking the original here.
Bruno, are you
Manfred
having flashbacks to the TurboGrafx version?
Who, me?
No, Bruno. He just said, "Oh God."
Actually, you might be right, Mike. I'm looking up more information. It might have been Turrican 3 first, and then then it was
Okay.
Super or Mega Turrican.
It's a little unclear. That's understandable.
Yes.
But the original Turrican was fostered by developer Manfred Trenz, this German guy who made the great Gianna Sisters, co-made that, a Commodore 64 port of R-Type, and a very R-Type-y shoot-'em-up by the name of Katakis, before he eventually fostered Turrican, and that probably became his most famous game. Funny enough, for Katakis and Turrican, Trenz apparently just looked up a random name in the phone book that he thought sounded cool, so... I wonder if Mr. or Mrs. Turrican knows what they inspired in this case.
Good question. Now, Trenz also did that one Super NES, Super Famicom game that was exclusive, right?
Rendering Ranger.
That's the one.
Ranger.
Mm-hmm. That's the one.
Yeah, and that one does also feel a little bit Turrican-y, except of course nowhere near as widespread, as it were. The thing about Turrican is that it is, I guess you could say, foremost an action platformer, a little bit sort of in the Contra-E mold. You can only shoot left and right, but if you stand still and hold the fire button, you can bust out this pretty wicked laser beam that, like, you can swivel around in many directions. That just looks really cool and all. You can also turn. What's that?
Now I'm having bad flashbacks to the TurboGrafx game again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm mostly familiar with the Amiga version, so I have good memories. But
Good.
You can also, like, you get this wicked spread gun, this laser, this sort of bounce shot. You can also turn into a invincible wheel that lays bombs, which is pretty cool. You also get, like, nukes that, or mega bombs that sort of spread these walls of fire out to the left and right. You're a pretty well armored guy. Ostensibly, Turrican is the name of the armor suit that you wear, but I don't know. The games are a little bit ambiguous about that. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them just called you, like, Turrican, the starfighter from the year 2040 who has to destroy the evil whatever empire. Well, I know that the bad guy of this series is known as the Machine, which is, probably a Terminator.
He's basically Galactus, too. They just clearly lifted Galactus for that.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Although, funny enough, the Machine didn't look like that until Mega Turrican / Turrican 3 and Super Turrican 2. I'm not even sure if you fought the Machine technically in the first two games, or just, fought their, lieutenants or whatever. But, what really set Turrican apart from other run guns was that most of its levels, they weren't quite 100% non-linear. They weren't as mazily designed as the Killing Game Shows levels, but they were a lot more wide open. You could go back and forth in them, and you get more powerful weapons and even extra lives if you were willing to nose around and explore in all the nooks and crannies that you could.
One second, Mike. Hold that thought for a second.
Uh-oh.
Logan, I can't, because I'm already a member of the Church of Burger Time. How you doing, Logan?
I could potentially convert to Bubsyism if I wanted to, but Rob would probably excommunicate me. So
how can I excommunicate you from a church I don't belong to?
Oh, well, okay. But yeah, so Turrican's earlier stages are more spread out. I think they get maybe... there are 5 different worlds And I think the first and the fourth world are the most open, and they have awesome soundtracks thanks to composer Chris Heelsbeck, except for the fourth world, which is a lot of creepy breathing noises, as I remember, because it's like the freakish alien world that feels really hostile and whatnot. I remember the third world was a little bit more straightforward, because some of the stages actually had you on a jetpack, and they were sort of like vertically scrolling shmup stages. But overall, pretty neat game that had a lot. That its sort of map design approach does make it quite a bit more involved than your other run and guns at the time. And this is the mold that sequel Turrican 2 more or less followed, except that its third world was a much more straightforward shmup area where you actually did get to pilot a full-blown Gradius-like ship. Mega Turrican / Turrican 3 would be more linear, but would also still have some exploration elements, and that also carry over into Super Turrican. Super Turrican 2 was, for the most part, even more linear, so it's like the series got, I guess, a little, past the first two, it got a little quote-unquote dumber, but for those who aren't willing to explore as much, I can see where the latter installments would be preferred. I don't know. Pick your poison, as it were.
Wasn't the second one ported to the Genesis under the title of Universal Soldier, based on the movie?
Yes. Yes, with the giant Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah. So, yeah, they not only made it inexplicably a Jean-Claude Van Damme vehicle, but while the gameplay was more or less intact, the stages were completely rearranged. I'm going to assume for the worst, because I never really played that much into Universal Soldier. As per the original version of Turrican 2, that, like Shadow of the Beast 3, is, as far as I remember, completely an Amiga exclusive. Except, like, I think maybe recently it finally had a re-release on, like, at least the Switch or whatever, but maybe on Steam too. I don't remember exactly.
It was, I think the whole thing about the re-release for that series is really messed up, because you had to get the original box version to get all of the games. They did eventually do a release on the Switch, but it doesn't include everything. It's really weird, but I guess that's just the kind of racket that limited run games runs.
Yeah, it's some bum candy, unfortunately.
Yeah, let's not talk about them.
But if we're talking the original game, there was one other port to the Sega Genesis, and it's a solid port, if not for two issues. The music has some sort of bugs with it, I think. Like, it doesn't sound quite right. And secondly, they made the infamous Turrican health system worse. If you're not familiar with how health works in Turrican, you have a health bar, right? Except there's no invulnerability time. It's basically like a grace period where if you touch an enemy, you only take, it drains only some of your energy, but if you stay on it too long, you die. In the Genesis version, you almost die instantly if you touch anything. Like, I think you maybe get like a fraction of a second of grace period, essentially, before you just are completely exploded.
Ouch.
There are ROM hacks recently released that actually fix some of the issues, but I think some of them are mutually exclusive or can't be stacked on top of each other, so you either get better music or better health, if I recall.
I'm glad I never played that one. I probably feel the same way about that as I do the Turbo game.
Yeah,
I think it is better than the Turbo port, to be fair, but not by much.
Yeah, that's still pretty bad.
Yeah, I hate to be a snob, but I never really fiddled much with the Genesis or TG16 ports. They just felt really off to me somehow after playing the Amiga originals. So,
oh, hey, Logan, that's fine. I'm not looking to convert anyone to the Church of Burger Time. I was born into the Church of Burger Time. I'll die in the Church of Burger Time. Doesn't matter to me if anyone else wants to join or not.
Oh, one more thing I wanted to note offhand. There was a bizarre, semi-original NES exclusive Turrican game that confusingly also had the title of Super Turrican as per the SNES game, but it was more like a weird rearranged version of the first game that I also think had some stages and elements from 2. It was like a weird rearranged mishmash of them.
Didn't that only come out in Europe?
Yes, it is a Europe exclusive as far as I remember. So, it plays pretty neat, but it is also a little bit frame rate flickery at times, if I'm not mistaken. It's not a bad little game, but it is definitely probably the biggest oddity in this series. So,
Yeah.
but it's kind of sort of a port-ish of the first one, kind of. Maybe, I don't know. I describe it. It's weird.
Well, I'll have to play the Amiga version of Turrican so I can actually get
You will,
the real
yes.
experience.
Yes, totally. It still might not be entirely your thing, but at least you can say that you've tried the legitimate version. So,
I did like Mega Turrican, so there's that.
indeed.
But anyway, yeah, Turrican. Any closing thoughts?
One version of it is good. The others are not so good.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Pretty much. I thought I was going to close with something more clever, but we should probably move on to something else.
Why don't we go ahead and, instead of discussing things like, cursed men that are supposed to wander around some kind of a weird world with zeppelins up in the sky, but, monsters on the ground, or, cybernetic super soldiers, why don't we talk about something cuter? Let's talk Lemmings.
Yes.
A very classic game, and I will have to read the obligatory. This game was made by DMA Design, who would later grow into becoming the mega game company Rockstar, or something like that. Like I forget the exact
We're now the
pipeline.
GTA factory.
Pretty much.
Yeah, back when, I guess, Dan or Steve Hauser, whatever, whoever the fuck worked on whatever. Anyway, Lemmings. Cool game. I'm terrible at it.
So, first of all, who here's played the PC version?
I played the Windows 95 version that actually
Hang
think
on
of
a
the
second.
DOS version.
Hang on a second. Okay, it's reconnected. Something just happened. I don't know what it was. Well, as long as it doesn't keep doing it, we'll be all right.
Yeah, at least.
Anyway, Lemmings, yes.
But yeah, Snarb, you were saying?
Yes, I've played the PC version via the Win95 version via Lemmings Paintball. It came with Lemmings and more Lemmings. And I probably put more time into Lemmings than I did in Lemmings Paintball. Interestingly enough, even though Lemmings Paintball is actually, in fact, a good cannon fodder clone with Lemmings.
Oh wow, really? Not familiar.
I could never. Okay, I've learned some tricks since I was a child. Notably, that you can turn a lemming into a blocker before you turn them into a bomber. I thought you had to time the bomb so they could blow up specific areas. No, you just tell them to stop and then blow them up.
Dang.
Well, I'm going to say two things here real quick. Sure. One, the only Lemmings games I've ever played have been the Master System and Game Gear versions, and they're basically identical. And also, if Betty was on with us right now, she could talk about Lemmings.
Nice.
She had to teach me how to play it because I had no clue, and I'm still terrible at it.
I'm trying to think of what versions I have played. I have played some PC version. I forget. I want to say it was likely the Amiga version that I have played, which I think is pretty one-to-one with the other PC versions of the game. I'm admittedly most familiar with the 16-bit console ports, more so the SNES one, which I don't think I ever bought, but I do distinctly remember renting it and finding it interesting and also funny. I know it's cruel, but I usually just went right to the nuke button, and, like, if you get trapped, you can't win. There's a nuke button where you can just blow up all the lemmings on the screen, and they all go like, oh no! And then it's like, and then they just all pop and destroy the level, and it then tells you, rock bottom! I hope for your sake that you nuked that level.
Yes, of course you did. I always like the crusher animation because I think in some versions there was actually gore and blood when they'd get crushed.
Ooh,
nice.
Yeah, no, this game was actually pretty creepy at times also. I mean, it being rooted in what would eventually become one of the more prominently violent series of the 2000s. I want to say that like some game was made, or like some animation was made of something just getting brutally killed, and then they like that evolved into the designs for the lemmings, where like them dying in various ways was morbidly a part of the appeal of the game. I don't know, that might be apocryphal. I forget the details exactly, but
sorry, Brandon, I can't summon the Betty for the lemmings. She's busy.
alas. But yeah, premise of Lemmings is that you have lots of little kind of humanoid, like kind of, I don't know, like they're not lemmings like the rodents exactly. They're more like
They're like
I don't know.
Smurfs. They're like Smurfs.
A little Smurfy, yeah. They got green hair. They have blue outfits. They have like large, kind of these large noses or whatever.
And they all look
they're
identical.
Pretty cute. Yes, there is that. They're a pretty cute design, a pretty iconic one. That I would say a lemming if you saw it instantly. But the goal is that they all drop down from a hole in the sky, and you gotta get them to the stage's exit by any means necessary in whatever map that you're in. You don't control them directly, but they all wander around left, right, until they hit a wall and turn around, or they fall off a cliff. And in any given stage, you can give the lemmings one of 8 powers as is available to you. You can make them climb walls, you can make them build stairways, you can have them mine through the ground, etc. As we mentioned, you can make them explode.
You're doing
you can
it
nuke
again,
them
Mike.
all, but there's... What's that?
You're doing it again.
Oh, rein it in.
Yeah. ETC.
Wow.
It's etc.
I'm not even aware that I fucking do that. It's just a weird quirk that I picked up.
I guess
I
so.
know it's not supposed to be like that, but it is what it is.
Huh.
Oh, Lemmings. Logan tells us Lemmings are actually based on a British IP called The Wubbles. There's even a Wubbles movie starring... I'm not sure if I've actually heard of this before. The Wubbles Adventure DVD.
And also, before you go on, Logan, yes, Betty does have some words for you for your recent choice. She says words are a good way to communicate.
Oh wait, Wombles. The Wombles. Are these guys like the British Fraggles or something?
Dance cares away.
Something another day. Oh god, I forget the damn thing. It feels like it's been too long since I saw one, but we were into that for a while. Anyway, but yeah, so you have to get a certain percentage of lemmings to the exit, depending on what the level is. Sometimes you only need like half of them. Some of the less forgiving ones require that you need all of them. And for some stages, you only get like, I don't know, 20 lemmings in total. Some of them just like have them fucking trickle out of the entrance, and you have to save like 200 or whatever. It all depends on whatever the levels is, and there are 4 sets of 20 levels divided into the categories of fun, tricky, taxing, and mayhem. Fun fact, I have never fully beaten the tricky set. I'm not great at this game.
I think I had an easier time playing Krusty's Funhouse.
You know, that one's not terrible, all things considered.
Still
it's not very
pain,
Simpsons-y, but it wasn't originally a Simpsons game.
No.
So.
Wait, didn't
yeah.
Lemmings also have a spin-off, too? Like a platformer of some kind?
Yes, Snarb, if you want to explain that. Oh, wait, he said...
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just got back, fortunately, for you to mention Lomax, which was... It's kind of a spiritual successor to the Misadventures of Flank on the Sega Genesis, or just Flank on the Sega CD. Same artist, Hank. I don't know if it's Nyborg or Nyborg. I don't know how you say it. I don't know how you pronounce his last name. But yes, it's got gorgeous graphics, very tough gameplay, but it's actually a pretty decent platformer interpretation of the franchise, given you get some of the Lemmings' powers as power-ups that you can use to help you navigate the levels. I could go into more detail, but it's probably something you should either play yourself or just look up on YouTube, because it's very gorgeous.
And I'm going to address this. Yeah. She said the same thing to me earlier. I have never played Pikmin, so I have no idea if they're like Lemmings or not. You, Mike?
Actually, that's not the worst comparison. Yeah, I can see some of the similarities. Like, Pikmin are rather cute and toyetic like the Lemmings are, and you can direct them to do all sorts of different things, although, the paradigms of Pikmin are somewhat different, and also all Lemmings look the same. Pikmin do come in several subspecies: the red, yellow, blue, the purple, the white, the rock, flying, ice, etc. But yeah, no, I see a bit of point of comparison between them. Only the Pikmin games, I think, are relatively accommodating to be beaten in a fair amount of time. The Lemmings games are a little bit beyond my comprehension of skill. I can at least beat the fun levels, but tricky onward, they do get pretty mean. And I also would like to criticize something, if I may, if this isn't a little, like, I don't know, skill issue or not. Well, sorry, Logan. I guess I need to study up.
He's actually right if you count the second game, Lemmings 2: The Tribes. I think they actually do vary the appearance a little bit in that version. Let me look that up.
Yeah, Lemmings actually did have several sequels to it. But before I mention that, just something I want to mention of the first game. I don't know if this got improved in the later games, but call skill issue me or whatnot, but a lot of the stages very heavily rely on the builders, and that gets really annoying after a while, because A, they build very slowly, B, you have to trigger them multiple times because they only build, like, I don't know, 15 blocks or so per activation, and C, it takes a lot of trial and error to figure out where you should build your stairs, and that's kind of where the game loses me when the building gets really heavy, in my humble opinion anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, the stairs, there's so much micromanagement with the damn stairs. It's ridiculous.
Okay, so it helps me good.
And you cannot, this is something that frustrates me with Lemmings, and I guess I kind of understand what they were going for, but you cannot issue commands to the Lemmings when you pause the game. So a trick you have to do, at least in the console versions, because I think I played the Genesis and I recently played the PlayStation version, the biggest difference between all the versions either being the graphic quality and the fact that whether you're using a mouse or a controller, that's going to change how it works. But the trick I discovered was select the power, pause the game, hover over the Lemming, then unpause and quickly use the power. It's really tedious, but it does work.
Well, dag. I really do like the idea of Lemmings. I do like the design. I like how occasionally creepy it can get, like that one level where, like, heaven is written in the sky in bloody letters over a giant pit of death. That just feels morbid to me for some reason. There's also
Bruno,
this one
you got your 2-minute warning now.
Here we go again. Damn it, Bruno. What was I going to say? Yeah, there's this. In one of the levels in any of the 4 given sets is actually based on another game that was published or made by Psygnosis, and there's this one based on a shoot 'em up called Menace, which is an incredibly bloody and icky stage with all these skulls everywhere, and it looks so fucking out of pocket and grotesque for this already kind of morbid game, but it's just like, wow, they really jacked this up, didn't they? I think it might have been censored from the SNES version, but I don't remember. At any rate, I do like the idea of Lemmings and a lot about its design, but in execution, I do honestly kind of find it a chore to play. It's one of those games that I respect more than I like, if that makes sense. That being said, it did get several sequels, and by all accounts, Lemming 2: The Tribes actually does seem quite a bit more improved, and there's a lot more shit to do in it. Like, the Lemmings got a lot more powers, and yes, they are different flavors. The only ones I really remember were the Scottish Lemmings, for some reason, when I rented it, but my memories in 2 are a little hazier, so...
Now, I seem to remember a game called The Humans, which I never played, but I remember looking at screenshots, and it reminded me a little bit of Lemmings.
The Humans.
I rented that one as a kid, and I could not figure out how to do anything. It is similar to the Lemmings, but it's a little bit more fiddly. One thing that is nice is you do have direct control over them, but that
Really?
also again leads to tedium because you have to micromanage every single one, and there's still issues like you get like kind of like the lemmings, they get certain abilities, and one of those is jumping, and you have to time the jumps just right because you have no air control. We're
Ooh.
talking like somehow worse than Simon Belmont jumps here.
Wow.
Dag.
Okay, glad I never looked into that one further.
I only know a little bit about the humans. I know it also got a Game Boy port, but into far as so much I know, it is actually completely unrelated to Lemmings. It maybe was inspired by it a bit, but I don't really, unfortunately, know a lot about it. Lemmings itself, however, I know it had an expansion called Oh No More Lemmings. There's the aforementioned Lemmings 2, the spin-off Lomax, third game known as All New World of Lemmings, which apparently was a lot more dumbed down compared to 2, and an infamous 3D Lemmings game because it was the mid-90s and everything had to be 3D. I remember that Chris Asick at Pixel Amusement looked at that one, and he said that it wasn't as bad as everyone thought it would be, but it is a little fiddly all the same. The aforementioned Lemmings Paintball, and a game by the name of Lemmings Revolution, which it apparently takes place on cylindrical levels? Huh? I don't really know much about this.
Yes, I always wanted to play that one because I'm a huge sucker for games with like tower or cylindrical stages, but apparently it's impossible or near impossible to get it running on modern versions of Windows. So,
ooh, again.
yeah. There was also a PSP port. A PSP port of one of the Lemmings games, or it was a new Lemmings game. I don't remember if it was completely new or just redone graphics. And that was it. That was the last Lemming games. Unless you want to count the awful mobile game, which I don't.
Well, what about Lemmings 5, The Search for Part 4?
I wish.
Quest for more money or whatever it was.
Apparently the PSP version was kind of a remake of the original, but it also had several brand new levels, and it was apparently developed by Team 17 of Worms fame. Interesting. But yeah, again, Lemmings, cool game, but it kind of pisses me off sometimes. That's how I guess on it. I realize I'm talking more about the games themselves and the nuances that the ports have, but as far as I can tell,
Go ahead.
Yes.
You can go, Snarb. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was going to wait for you, but
Dead aired it. Sorry,
there are some games where the ports are almost dead on, and this is one of those cases. Again, the biggest difference between versions is typically game speed. You know, maybe the quality of the palettes and the graphics. You know, depending on how they have to adapt it, and whether you're using cursor controls with the keyboard, or not a keyboard, excuse me, with a gamepad, or you're using a mouse. Mouse is preferred, but with some of the other versions, it's actually not too bad. Like, I think the PlayStation version might have analog controls, and that also includes Oh No More Lemmings. And I got quite a ways into that one. I was just testing it out, and I got kind of sucked into it because I really love the Lemmings franchise and games, even if I am quite terrible at most of them.
I do remember that the Super NES port, which was actually published by Sunsoft, of all companies, if you can believe it. It got 5 exclusive levels that are apparently very hard. That's all I wanted to mention. Okay.
Oh, I wasn't actually air horning you, Mike.
Oh.
Bruno got air horned.
Keeping up this bid, aren't you, sir?
Oh,
anyway.
Yes, he is.
Anyway. But I haven't played the 5 levels, obviously. I mean, fuck, I never even got to taxing, so I couldn't tell you much about that, but a neat little bonus, at least. Just, Sunsoft is not the company that I would associate with this type of game, although Sunsoft in the 16-bit days were really fucking weird.
Yeah, they were.
They definitely were not quite as solid as they were in the NES, I can say that.
Yes, and Brandon,
I don't know, Mike. I think Blaster Master 2 is a perfectly cromulent follow-up.
Snarb, get off my stream. Right now.
Any y'all familiar with Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner and Death Valley Rally? Because I fucking grew up on that game, boy howdy.
I rented it once and sucked. I took it back.
The Genesis Roadrunner game is definitely a little bit better. It's a little bit more Sonic-y, and despite that, it's pretty damn good for a Sonic clone. You can also play as Wile E. Coyote in that one as a first.
Oh wow, that's really neat. The SNES version, the SNES game was terrible. I missed out in this case. Damn it. Anyway, we digress. We should probably move on. Sorry.
Yeah, let's go to another aside for a little bit here. Let's talk about SimCity.
Oh, yes, sure. Definitely.
I have virtually nothing to say about this game. I played a couple minutes of the Super NES game and a couple minutes of the unreleased NES game, and that's it.
Well, guess who reached Megalopolis status on the SNES game once?
Snarb.
Hey, come on.
I've only played 2000, and I can't even remember if I played any of the ports of 2000. That was another game that also got ported a lot, along with the original.
Well, I really need to play 2000 more. Most seem to like that. Actually, I've been hearing some more support for 3000 also lately. I know that Clint Basinger really likes 3000, but I'm only familiar with the first game, and specifically, I'm really only familiar with the SNES port, which by all accounts is apparently pretty accurate, except that I actually prefer the SNES port because it has an X factor that, as far as I know, the original PC versions don't, and that is, if you complete certain milestones, you get gift buildings. Like, you build so many roads and you can build an amusement park or a casino. Like, you can get,
something?
Hoop. What else? Yes, something. You build a lot of parkland. You can get a central park that boosts commercial areas if you place it next to them. You build so many stadiums, and you get I was going to say an airport. Damn it, I forget the gifts exactly. But, yeah, for anyone who's not familiar, SimCity, you build a lot of buildings with the budget that you're allotted to build, and you watch your population grow. It is, I guess, something of a life sim, but also does have a somewhat concrete goal of how many citizens can you bring into your fledgling town. And it is very involved. There are all sorts of map formations that you can make. There are also, at least in the SNES version, I'm not sure if the PC originals had this, but there are also several scenarios where you have to complete a certain goal, like have this population this high in like 5 years despite a disaster really wrecking things at the start. Yeah, I know that the staples of buildings are the residential, commercial, and industrial areas, but you can also build... But you have to build roads and or train tracks to get near them, and power lines, and make power plants in order to keep things actually running. You can also build police departments, fire departments, you can even build stadiums and seaports and airports to really make your thing grow. But you have to do it within budget, and if you spend too much too soon, you will have to unfortunately raise taxes, just like a politician would. That's all I'm going to say, Mike. On that end. Yeah, like, the overall, like, sort of mega goal of the main game is to reach a whopping population of 500,000, 500,000 people to make it a megalopolis. Apparently, Dr. Wright, who, character completely originally made for the SNES version based on the game's original creator, Will Wright, he gives you an additional message if you manage to reach 600,000. Sadly, I did not get that high. Sometimes factors in improving population can be, I guess, somewhat arbitrary, but I am glad I managed to get to a megalopolis at least once. Apparently, though, in the SNES version, if you reload your game, that, like, drops the population. There's, like, some sort of glitch or whatever. So if you want to reach a megalopolis, it's much easier to do so in one sitting, which can take a long time, so I found out. But I did do it once.
Or just use save states.
Or that, yes. That's probably the better option.
Now, I have to ask you two questions about this game.
Yo.
If you had a megalopolis and it got destroyed in a disaster, would it be a doomed megalopolis?
Thank you, Yoshinori Kato. I have no fucking idea.
I only know... Sorry, go ahead.
I only know the antagonist from that because he was the inspiration for M. Bison, or Dictator.
Indeed. But that brings me to another Japanese property. Doesn't the SNES version have Godzilla in it, and that's exclusive?
Well, some versions have Godzilla or a generic kaiju. I can't remember if Godzilla was ever officially licensed or if he was just
generic giant lizard man. The thing, I believe the giant monster is actually in most, if not all, versions. The thing about the SNES version, though, is that the giant monster is actually Bowser, of all things.
Oh, that was it, yes!
Which is pretty great, if I do say so. Also a cute thing, if you do reach the Megalopolis landmark, you can actually build a Mario statue, which is... a little self-serving, but pretty amazing.
Pay homage to your Nintendo god.
A very prescient thing to say
the
nowadays.
plumber.
If I do say so, fucking, the Disney of video games, but I don't want to get too much into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like other gifts, you can build... Once you just reach the first milestone, which is 2,000 people to turn it from a village to a town, you can build your own mayor house, which... apparently gets more elaborate the more people, the larger your city becomes. There's also a zoo, windmill, train station, library, fountain, etc. I don't think any of these gift buildings were in the PC versions, although if anyone is more familiar with the PC versions, do let me know. I probably should have played at least one of the computer versions before going about this, but I just have a lot of fun memories.
That's why we made this as an aside rather than a full-blown, let's go into this.
Yes, exactly. But it is a really cool game, whatever you play, but the original SimCity will probably seem a little bit pedestrian if you've played 2000 or 3000 or whatever of the sequels, which I really should get on at least one of those someday, but, sometimes it's hard to beat nostalgia, I will shamefully admit so.
Well, just to wrap this up, let me just say that for... what I've played of both the unreleased NES and the Super NES SimCities, I'd rather play ActRaiser.
Of course you would. Sadly...
Damn right I would.
Sadly, SimCity does not have you play as an angelic warrior hacking apart the forces of Tanzra, quote-unquote. I guess some action scenes would have been cool to break up the monotony. And yeah, right, there's also that unreleased NES version. I remember I tried to play that, but either the ROM I had was goofy or the emulator I was trying to use didn't work with it, so I didn't get very far, if at all.
And you are right about that, Jay. ActRaiser is definitely far more entertaining.
ActRaiser's great, but...
no one's talking about ActRaiser 2 here, Bruno.
Yeah, no, fuck ActRaiser 2 up his ass. I hate that game, sorry.
However, funny you mentioned ActRaiser, because I think there's a certain game that we could easily transition into that reminded me of ActRaiser once I finally really got into it.
Is that game Stormlord?
No. At least... well, maybe the action...
No, I know what game you're talking about, but yes.
If we wanted to, Rob, is that the next one you want to talk about? This is your stream. I don't want to necessarily hijack it.
Hey, what the hell? Let's go for it.
Okay, cool.
We are talking about Populous, right?
Yes. I don't know if you wanted to introduce that or what. I feel like I'm just kind of
I figured here. You're my co-host for a reason here, Mike, which means you can go ahead and segue into stuff, just as much as I can.
Hooray, segways. I've never ridden on one before. Anyway, so Populous is one of the earliest games made by the rather now infamously disgraced Peter Molyneux. But, before he became the Lord God of Bullshit, he actually was a legitimate developer who sort of popularized the concept of the God game. And I don't know if he had an earlier concept of the same idea, but one of the earliest games that he made on this idea was Populous, where you play a benevolent arch-being who commands a righteous group of people who will build their own civilization, but eventually go into war against the forces of evil.
Maybe you play as benevolent, but I always go over and wreak havoc on the other guy.
That's right.
Yeah, you're supposed to.
That's right. This can be played with 2 players going head to head with each other, right?
Yeah.
Can it?
Well, you usually fight against AI as well in some of the missions.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'll be honest, of the games we're talking about tonight, this is actually the one that I knew the least going into, so I made it a point over this week to try and figure out how to play Populous the right way, and it was a little slow going at first, because I didn't understand what the icons meant, but eventually I found a good manual scan, and it sunk in, and I mostly knew what I was doing. There were still some janglies, a few things I didn't fully understand, but I got enough to at least beat the first world that you can play in one player. It's just known as Genesis to start, but then all the other worlds you have are like randomly generated, and they're like world 6x 20xt6. No, I just across that.
The question is, did you get a monster who like marched across the entire continent and laid a line of mountains behind him?
No.
Oh, you're lucky then. That thing will just
that
walk
happen to
through
you?
everything. Yes, a number of times. This thing will just
Wait.
walk. He'll just appear out of nowhere. He's not summoned by anybody. He's a random thing. He'll just march down the screen laying mountains.
It's like a troll or something, isn't it? I'm trying to remember. I think I've seen that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get far enough to see this giant mountain layer, to be honest. If that is a thing, he's not at the beginning of the single player campaign.
Yes,
so
he is.
I do not know what to tell you, unfortunately.
Which version were you playing?
I was playing the SNES version, for what it's worth.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah, and the SNES version is interesting because it's the only one that actually refreshes the interface. It actually has a slightly different interface, probably because the SNES has a slightly smaller resolution, and it also appears to include the mission pack, which has different terrains like a Candy Land and a Computer Land, or in this case, a Super Famicom Land, with controllers and, like circuit boards and other sort of stuff.
Yet apparently Molyneux thought that was the worst one.
Well, I guess I should have played the Genesis version. I'm trying to see if Bruno's around. So
which is the version I've played. I believe they actually included it on the, the Mega Drive Mini or the Sega Genesis Mini 2. And I just decided to sit down with that version out of curiosity because it's always a game I've heard a lot about. And I was curious about because I think I saw the box art, along with some other strategy games at the time. I think Tyrants was another one I distinctly remember. Fight Through Time, I believe, was the subtitle on that one. But yes, as far as I can tell, it's almost identical to either the Amiga or the PC version. Same interface, same exact gameplay. I don't know how the soundtracks differ between the versions. I know there was a heartbeat sound effect. It's very atmospheric.
Oh, yeah.
I put a few
the
hours
original
into
Populous...
it.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The original Populous is creepy. It's just like these... these chants and this heartbeat is like your only ambience, and it is. I find it slightly creepy, and yet at the same time oddly entrancing. So,
yes, I put a few hours into the Genesis version out of curiosity. I was lost at first, and I'm like, you know what? This is time. It's time for me to RTFM. So it actually includes the manual, or they had a link to it. I think you have to use a QR code, and it takes you there. And I read over it, and it's like, oh, okay, this is pretty simple. And it works the same way in the Genesis version as it does in the PC. You try to flatten the land for followers. You try to build up, like the more followers you have, I think the faster your mana meter. You can create a general or whatever who can guide your people to fight your enemies. You can cast spells. It's a very interesting game. It's surprisingly streamlined and actually simpler than you'd expect for an early God Sim strategy game, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty intuitive.
I will have to agree on that. Not having really played it at all until finally for the first time a week ago, I was a little daunted at first, but You really do have to read the manual for this one, for better or worse, but mostly to figure out what the icons are, because the game itself won't really tell you. Although I remember the Genesis version actually had an attract mode that did actually serve as something of a tutorial.
Yes, actually, that's how I learned how to play some of the basics, but there's more to it than that, than what they show, obviously, so you still got to read the manual.
Now, you
And
guys,
the SNES version does not have that one, so Peter might have been onto something.
now, you guys came into Populous a lot later, I'm guessing here.
Yes, very late.
Much, much later in my case, yes.
Do not cite the deep magic to me. I was there when it was written. Populous was actually one of the earliest Genesis games I'd played.
I never would have guessed that.
Well, here's what happened. And it's a pretty entertaining story. Bromley had picked it up. And he brought it home. So we played it. You know, we took turns trading off. And I was like, this is interesting. I've never played a game like this before. And, well, at the time, we were both still in high school, and his mother would usually ask what he'd bought, you know? So, in this case, he showed her, and that's where he made his first mistake, and I'm going to kind of leave that off on a question mark, because his mom was very religious.
Yep.
And she saw on the back of the box, it said, "Play God" in big letters. And she slammed the game as being sacrilegious. What are you two doing back there?
Hey.
I can hear you, you know. Well, she slammed it as being sacrilegious, told me he had to return it. And he wasn't even allowed... 1 minute warning now, Bruno. He wasn't even allowed to keep it in the house. He had to keep it in his car's glove compartment overnight. There was no second mistake. When he went back to exchange it, he ended up getting Revenge of Shinobi, which, as it turns out, was the game he'd wanted in the first place, but they were out of stock when he bought Populous.
Oh.
Yes, how fortuitous.
Yes. So, therefore, I then played Revenge of Shinobi and liked that a whole hell of a lot more than Populous. But every so often I'll, still fire up Populous and just run through Genesis real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I have at least beaten the Genesis world, so I can claim that. It then took me next to a desert world, which I think is a little bit difficult. I remember the manual I read denoted all the different lands and said that terrain in some is harsher and or you don't build mana as fast in these. I also remember, I didn't get into any other worlds, but I remember actually reading about them and if you can believe this, it was covered in a Super NES guide released by, I think it was published by Nintendo Power, but same publication. They did one for NES game maps, the Game Boy Top Secret Passwords, if anyone remembers those, I don't know. And yeah, when the SNES came out, in its first year or so, it had a guide that briefly dove into details for for most of the different games that was out for it. And I remember there was Populous, and it explained what all of the different worlds were, and that led me to the word Japanesque, which... Yes, there is one area there's one terrain where everyone looks like, samurai, and the castles that you build have those distinct, those distinct Japanese mansion roofs or whatever, and there are cherry blossom trees, and I always thought that was really cool. There's also a piglet world where you play as pigs fighting against wolves, which is just the cutest damn thing ever. I'm pretty sure that was an expansion thing, whatever the case, but...
Yes, there was an expansion that did end up reaching some of the versions. I don't know if the Genesis version has it, but I know the PC and Amiga version did, as well as an Amiga-exclusive tile set editor, allowing you to create your own tile sets. That's the only version that has it, too. It's quite interesting.
Cool.
You know what gets me, though?
What's that?
You can make swampy terrain in that.
You can, yes.
You don't even get a good Monty Python joke.
that one went over me. I'm sorry.
You have seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, haven't you?
It's been an extremely fucking long time since I have. I'm not gonna lie.
Look around this land. Someday this will all be yours. What, the curtains? Or, you know, they could have made a joke about how you built the castle there and it sank into the swamp. So we built another castle on top of that, which sank into the swamp. And now there's the castle they're on.
Oh, as per it being a game, you know, primarily directed by Mr. Molyneux, who himself is British, it does feel like there's a little bit of a sort of Monty Pythonian sort of overall design to it. The best way I can put it.
He definitely dialed that up in some of his later gods. Since I don't know about the latter populaces, but I know Black and White definitely has some dry British humor going on and silliness.
Curious, I just looked up a couple of other ports. This game actually made it to, if you can believe it, the PC-98 and the Sharp X68000. I'd like to see those versions and see
Also,
if the Japanese ports have any twists on them.
it also made it to the Sega Master System.
1 year after the 16-bit ports, which is fucking weird.
Yeah.
And the TurboGrafx 16, apparently? Am I reading this right?
I don't think I've encountered that version yet. But I
I don't
know
know if it was unreleased or not.
I played the Master System version briefly, and it's actually a pretty good port.
Nice. And it came to the Game Boy as well. I can't imagine how weird that port would be.
Yeah, I haven't even tried that one.
So yeah, it did get quite a few ports, and as we mentioned, it did get a few sequels, notably Populous 2 Trials of the Olympian Gods had Populous 2 was originally released for the Amiga, and it was also released on the Genesis, the X68000. It missed out on and DOS. It missed out on the NEC on the PC-98, but it did get an FM Towns port. And by all accounts, the Super NES version of Populous 2 was much better than the kind of meh port of the original. This one actually had SNES mouse support, if you can believe it. The peripheral best known for Mario.
It should be noted, I think the Genesis port of Populous 2 was exclusive to Europe, and I think Populous 2 on the SNES, was that exclusive to Japan, or did we actually get that one too?
Did we?
I don't ever recall seeing that.
Good question. I think that might have also been a European exclusive. I'm going to have to look into this. Populous 2.
Yes, let me look that up. Hold on. It says United Kingdom and Japan only for the Populous 2 on the SNES.
So us Yanks missed out on it. Makes sense, I guess.
We sure did.
Yeah,
We're probably too busy playing. Fuck, I don't know.
yeah, exactly. Something.
Yeah, definitely something.
I know another thing that we weren't playing that the Europeans were.
What's that?
Parodius.
Yeah.
Damn it, Konami. Anyway. So moving on, let's any final words about Populous at all?
Interesting game. I need to play more of it. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, just a brief anecdote. When I was trying to beat the Genesis world yesterday, the first time I actually really observed the manual and took it seriously, I was actually doing pretty well. I was building my people up to a pretty good degree, and I was staying more or less even with the enemy's forces. And I decided I hadn't really used the terrain magic enough, and I wanted to jinx the opponent and cast a few swamp spells on their turf.
What the
I
curtains?
accidentally... What? God damn it. I accidentally cast the Flood spell, which has a very similar looking icon, but is a much more fucking destructive and actually suicidal spell if you don't properly prepare for it. So I ended up sinking most of my own men and pretty much just botching the whole fucking run as a result.
Congratulations,
Mike.
Congratulations.
While looking this up as well, there was a DS remake of Populous, and I'm curious how that one turned out. I think I remember seeing that in the day and being like, Populous?
Dang.
On the Nintendo DS?
Weird.
I'm gonna have to look this up. That does seem like a pretty good fit for the DS's capabilities, honestly.
It does, yes, because of the touch screen. And that kind of brings me to a brief point I wanted to make. I really wish developers would actually start bringing strategy games back to consoles. They did not shy from doing that up until about maybe the PlayStation 2 era. And I find that really strange. Like, even the N64 got StarCraft. And I think one of the Command and Conquer games, too. And they were both actually pretty good ports.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why we couldn't do that again. I think that's really nice that we were able to get these games, even if, they're not everybody's cup of tea, on a console.
No, I do have to agree. It feels like that the concept of a primarily PC-centric genre on a console just kind of seems doomed from the start, especially because it's not likely to have mouse support or control as easily. But I do think that it was a pretty cool idea to bring more PC-centric games to consoles more often. And speaking of Bullfrog, one of Bullfrog's other major hits, Syndicate, also got several console ports, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think it did.
Yes, it did.
So the 90s were a pretty cool time for games sometimes, and then the 7th gen hit, and then it sucked. The end.
Pretty much.
I had to get one in there. I'm sorry. It's like obligatory at this point.
Yeah, typical for you.
Yeah, well, I got an image to uphold, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's move away from all this God stuff then and whatnot, and let's go out into space. Let's talk Star Control.
Yes, let's.
This is one I actually had a pretty good time with on several different platforms, namely the PC and the Genesis. First played it on the PC when I was in high school. Someone was just giving out copies of the game on as long as you had a floppy disk, so I brought one in, copied it, and I'd go around any class where I was like, my senior year at the time. If I had a class I didn't need, then if they had a computer in the room, I'd just go back there, make sure the sound was off, and play Star Control. Or Sylpheed, or that, I think it's Battletech, the Crescent Hawk's Inception, which I could never make sense out of. Or Digger. Digger was another one. That was a interesting little Dig Dug clone, but I digress. Star Control. That is really fun. Mainly because, there's 3 different types of games you can play on there. You've got Melee. You've got, I think it's like Super Melee. Or something along those lines. And there is the campaigns, which are basically just the melees with extra steps, like going to planets and, annexing them or mining them or whatever. But I never got into those. No, melee's where it's at for me, because you basically pick one of, I think, 12 ships, maybe 14, and you can select, if you're playing a one-player game, put the other ones being, you can have the computer pick the ship and then pilot it. And you can actually choose which difficulty level you want it to be on. Or you can cripple it by just having it select the ship and then the non-existent player 2 fights. So you can just go have some target practice. But each ship is unique. They're all supposed to represent different alien races. Let's see. Like, the 2 big... this is Star Control. Or StarCon.
Mm-hmm. Toys for Bob.
Yep, Toys for Bob. But, okay, the 2 heavy cruisers in the game. You've got the Urquan Dreadnought and the... it's not the Chinjeshu, is it?
There is a race called the Chinjeshu, yes.
Yeah, there is, but I think I can't remember if that's one with the big crystal ship or something else.
Yeah.
I can't keep track of the names except for arguably the best ship in Star Control, that being the X-Fighter or whatever it is that transforms.
I call them... you're going to punch me for this one. I call them the Murnerherm. Do-do-do-do-do. The Murnerherm. Do-do-do-do.
I think you need to
That's
be...
pretty appropriate given their victory jingle is like a bunch of bongo.
I think you need to be introduced to the Sirens. Mike.
Oh, the Sirens, yes. The very
Yes.
blatantly based off of the Orions from Star Trek games.
And they fly around in giant dildos.
They do, yes. It's called the
Yes,
Siren
the penetrators.
Penetrator.
And they're ribbed.
Very simple.
Yeah, it even mentions that when you're actually looking at like when they're doing like the sort of screens for each of the ship describing their I think they're like mind control ribbing or something like that. One of the things about each of the races is that they actually have like an X factor with their ship that can do certain things. Like the Mycons can regenerate their dudes. I think the Irquan Masters have the fighters from their huge ship, and then the Sirens can actually hypnotize other crews from enemy ships and then steal them.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a crazy, and you think it would be a pretty broken asset, but I mean, all the ships do play quite differently from each other. There's probably like a tier list of which is the strongest and which is the crappiest. I remember that a lot of people like the Spathy ships due to just being
they can shoot backwards.
Yes, which is immensely useful, to say the least, when it befits them being a cowardly race of, like, little eye slug fellows, but it's a really useful thingy, as I remember.
One of my favorites is the one that looks like a Klingon bird of prey, but it's crewed entirely by giant spiders.
The Ilrath. They have a fucking flamethrower, which is pretty cool.
And a cloaking device. I love it when you get a view of their ship when you're actually looking at it, what it can do. You can see one of the other ships being incinerated by the flamethrower, and a line points to it and it says, "Poor tactical positioning."
Nice.
Yes, this game has a great sense of humor, and it just really shines through in every facet of it. You can tell they had fun with this.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, the second biggest ship below the Irquan Dreadnought is the Chenjesu Broodhome.
That's the crystal ship, right?
Yeah, the Chenjesu is like a crystal race, artificial intelligence race, and the Murnerherm are like, I think, like a mechanical contract race. I almost want to talk a bit about Star Control 2, since I'm actually much more familiar with that one than I am the first. But
you're talking about how they merge, aren't you?
Yes, that's actually a very late game thing that happened, so I guess it's a spoiler, but, you know, it's an old game by now. So the Chenjesu and the Murnerherm eventually merge into the Churm, or however the fuck you pronounce it, and they're, like, arguably the best ship in the game, but they're, like, you know, you get them in the 11th hour. But I'll get into the second one a little bit more later, but,
I'll tell you,
yeah.
two of my other favorite ships in that, you've got the Shofixti Scout, which looks like a little, little space fighter piloted by Rocket Raccoon.
Yeah, pretty much. I believe you could actually blow them up on purpose, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they have the kamikaze attack, and it can take out even the biggest ships in the game if you position yourself just right.
Yep.
That sounds like some pretty tricky gambiting, but probably for the exclusive combat mode, maybe not the best angle to go for. Yeah. There is a mode.
Well, I think you're gonna tie game that way. If you're going to lose, you might as well.
That is a good point. Nice from Hell's Heart. A very Khan Union Sing move.
Hell's Heart, I stab at thee.
But, there is a mode where you can just pilot the 12 ships against each other, head-to-head or against the CPU, if you want. And that's probably what everyone went with, like, 90% of the time. And the way the ships also controls a little bit sort of like asteroids, except that you're trying to blow up another ship instead of, asteroids. And that is pretty neat and all, but there is also a more full-fledged mode where you pick one of several campaigns that have more of a sort of strategic element to them. I don't know if you call it strategy or if you call it an RPG or what. I admittedly haven't played this mode too much, but it seems relatively straightforward. You're just supposed to, like, spread your fleet out to other planets and, like, fortify them, mine them, build your resources, build more ships, and then eventually vanquish the enemy forces or whatever other goals you might have.
basically what I was saying when I started the segment out.
Yes.
Oh,
I will give shoutouts to one of the scenarios. I haven't poked the game yet. I was just comparing the Amiga and the Genesis versions, which, as far as I can tell, the Genesis is a port of the Amiga version. But one of the campaigns has you all you get is an Urquan dreadnought, and then you have to take out a colony of Shofixti. It's really interesting because you've got this massive ship versus the tiny little fighters.
Mm-hmm.
you play as the Goliath versus several Davids. That's a very interesting premise. The Dreadnought is probably, for all intents and purposes, the strongest ship in the game. It is at least the hugest. It's maybe the most unwieldy, but in most cases, I think you can overwhelm the opponent with sheer brute force. And
you can.
Also, they're able to send out homing fighters that automatically
Launch
attack.
fighters.
Yes, a very
They
dreaded
do
thing
use
to
up
hear.
crew members, however.
Yes.
The fighters actually have crew members in them, and if they get destroyed, there's your crew.
Yep.
Yeah, so you don't want to spam that too much, but it always struck me, I mean, being that the Urquan are the big bads, I guess, in this time frame, they'd be the Klingons and or Romulans in TOS terms, or the Cardassians in TNG terms.
Or if you wanted to say Star Wars, they're basically like the Empire.
Yeah, pretty much. Except they're a lot less Britishy and a lot more alien-y.
They're centipedes, basically.
Yeah, they're big green ooglies, to say the least.
Now I'll tell you one of the things I like to challenge myself in the melee mode sometimes. So I'll have it where I pick both ships, and what I'll do is I'll have the computer pilot the other one. So for the computer, I'll pick the Urquan Dreadnought, and for myself, I'll pick the Lile Skiff.
Oh, nice.
Now that one, it looks like a little flying saucer, being piloted by a green dude. And you, for one thing, are not affected by gravity. Because there are planets in the stages that can actually pull you in if you get too close.
Oh, cool.
And you'll bounce off them and lose some of your life. It can also warp through hyperspace. Plus, it has like a homing laser on it. So my goal is to get as close to the Urquan as I can and do as much damage as I can before it's able to turn its main cannon on me and vaporize me in one shot.
Dang.
Because that's all it takes from your Urquan Dreadnought. For that Lile, it'll just blow it to bits one hit. You may not believe this. I've beaten the Urquan like that before.
Very nice.
Granted,
I'm sure it takes a lot of practice to do.
Well, granted, when I had him down to his last couple of crew members, which is the life bar, basically, he was basically ready to go ahead and shoot me until I warped out and I ended up right behind the planet. So, of course, the ship charges at me and bumps itself on the planet. And then it was caught in the gravitational pull, and it just kept smacking into the planet until it blew up.
That seems like an actual maneuver in an episode of Star Trek that would have won the day or something like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll call it the Boimler maneuver.
Oh, I wish. Lower Decks is so great. I'm sad it's apparently going to be ending now.
Yeah. But we digress. Anyway, having played both the PC and the Genesis version of Star Control, they themselves are practically identical. And the Amiga version, I think, just adds some bells and whistles that the Genesis one, that it got ported from.
If I'm reading this correctly, it seemed that the Genesis version actually added several more scenarios than the computer versions did. Is that true?
Interesting.
I remember reading something about that, actually.
Yeah, this is just on Wikipedia, so take this with as much salt as you want, but it's saying 9 missions on home computers and 15 missions on the Sega Genesis version.
Mm-hmm.
So, take that as you will, I suppose, if anyone could look this up, because I admittedly haven't played any version of this outside the Genesis version. But there is that, which is cool. Oh, there's also one more thing that I wanted to mention about the strategy mode, which I think is
really neat and really good for a unintelligent gremlin like myself.
Okay.
There are 4 control modes that you can put in for the campaigns. You can either be a full-fledged human, you can leave it entirely to computer, you can pick computer versus computer and see who plays out. Or there are 2 more modes. There is the cyborg mode, where you get to determine all of the strategic assets of your campaign, but the combat is actually computer controlled.
That's what I use in Melee.
Ah, yes. However, I tend more towards the reverse mode, which is the Cytron, which actually decides all of your strategic stuff for you, which I am mostly crap and or impatient at. But you fully control the combat segments.
Now that, of course,
really neat thing.
that's of course if you're playing the scenarios.
Yes, exactly.
You do have those options when you're just playing Melee.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and set the player to cyborg and just let him go from there.
Exactly.
Speaking on, the Star Control is basically like a fighting game. You have the obligatory story mode, but most people are really going to be sinking their teeth into the Melee.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So, yeah, although, is this where I can segue into the sequel?
Briefly.
Briefly, yeah. Star Control is probably better known... Okay, I'll try. Star Control is probably better known for its sequel, Star Control 2, which is a lot more involved, adds many more races, and instead of having like several strategic campaigns that, you know, can maybe only last like an hour or 2, it gets a full fucking fledged RPG mode, a full-on quest and storyline, which is one of the best Star Trek games that wasn't really a Star Trek game back for its day, and I actually did manage to play through it a while ago, and I had a lot of fun with it. Although there are some things that are probably better to look up on an FAQ, but it's really neat. And also, the android synth are all dead. Don't ask the Ors about it.
Oh well. Anyway, so we're going to move on from Star Control now. And now
Don't
we're going to...
Star Control 3. So I hear.
Don't play it?
I hear Star Control 3 is a very inferior sequel. I forget why, though.
Oh well. So, I'm basically going to turn this next one over to you guys, because I have very little experience with this game.
Yes.
Wolfenstein 3D.
Yes!
Now, I briefly played the Super NES port once, maybe. I barely remember it. There's a homebrew Genesis version I played, which was actually pretty impressive. And
I didn't realize that existed.
Yeah. And I did play the 3DO version, and honestly, all I wanted to do was go back and play Road Rash again. So, I've never played it on the PC. I'm pretty sure you both have. So,
Yes.
So hit us with some Wolfenstein.
Not the biggest fan of this game. I'm more fascinated by how different every single port of this game is, because you have the original game, which had 3 episodes. Then there was the, I believe, the expansion that added 3 more. Was it the Nocturnal Missions? I can't remember.
Yes. Inferior to the original 3, but they existed.
So I've heard, yes. Then there was the Mac port, which I don't think it had episodes. I think it had one long campaign, which was then spun off, I think, for both the 3DO and SNES ports.
Yes.
Yeah, someone's racing their vehicle outside. Sorry about that.
You're good.
Yeah.
And then there was the Jaguar version, which was itself its own port, and I forget how many of them have episode selects. I forget how many of them are just one long kind of campaign. I do know the SNES version's probably the weakest port, because, you know, you have to play it in the tiny little window. They censored it, and instead of dogs, you fight giant rats for some reason. There's no blood. There's none of the things that appeal outside of killing Nazis. I mean, that's an appeal of its own, but they basically defanged it, and I understand why. There was no way that game was going to get an uncensored release on a console like the SNES, at least. There never was a Genesis port, even though it could have run it, judging by games like Bloodshot. And I think there was one other game that was very similar, but the name escapes me.
Zero Tolerance?
Yes, actually, that's a good one, and that's actually the good game on its own. But
I actually like Zero Tolerance. I'm not an FPS fan.
Yeah. I
It's a
remember
good
just
game.
really,
It's very
really,
good.
I didn't beat it, but I got like an hour into it, and it was just kind of addicting to just keep exploring in it. But anyway, but yeah, Sarb, you have anything else to say?
Well, outside of not being a big fan, some versions do add more weapons. I believe that it was started with the Mac version. It adds the rocket
Yes.
launcher and the flamethrower. They don't work. Okay, the rocket launcher doesn't work like how you would expect it to from later FPS games. Instead of being like a thing that hits an enemy and explodes and does a lot of damage, it instead pierces enemies. It's really weird.
Yeah.
I think the flamethrower is just a rapid fire weapon that's a projectile instead. It might also pierce enemies, but it doesn't travel as far or something. I forget which one is technically the ultimate weapon, but by default, I'm not the biggest fan of this franchise because you have a limited set of weapons. They all share the same ammo, and having to knife dudes really, really sucks.
Yeah, I'm probably weird in that I am actually quite fond of Wolfenstein 3D, although I acknowledge it is very old school, also quite a brutal game since all of the enemies fire what are known as hit-scan projectiles, which you can't dodge them out in the open. You have to find cover or their bullets will hit you. It certainly doesn't have as much variety as its more famous younger brother, which we may or may not be getting to in a bit. But, I don't know. The basics of just killing a lot of Nazis is rather cathartic. And,
Oh yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I love that concept.
And it's, it is relatively simple in its design, and it can be easy to get lost in some of the larger stages, but I don't know. I have a lot of nostalgia of this one. I played it when I was probably much younger than I should have been, but I did literally grow up playing this one, so at a very early age, I was taught that all Nazis are bad and must be obliterated, but, it is what it is.
Well, I was taught the same thing by the Indiana Jones movies, so there you go.
Yeah, oh yeah. I forget when I saw Raiders in relation to playing Wolfenstein 3D, but they are both very much of that same strain, as it were. So I am quite familiar with the PC version. I have in fact beaten all levels in all 6 episodes somehow. I couldn't tell you what's the best level because they are far, far less distinct than what other stages in future FPS games would foster, but for as old school ass as they are, I have a good enough time with how simple it is. I mean, you don't get much for weapons, the only ammo you ever get are bullets, and your knife and pistols suck, and you should not use them once you get a machine gun, and unless you want to save ammo, which, considering you can only hold 99, the original, that's fair. You probably won't be using the machine gun much once you get the chain gun. It didn't really, this is before the concept of, various weapon stats and utilities and purposes became more of a thing, with much more diverse arsenals in future FPS games. But for as old school and for as brutal as it is, again, I just have a nostalgic attachment to it, and I still do find it fun every now and again, even if many FPSs that come after it kick the pants out of it. So,
Okay, 2 things.
I do also,
Yeah.
yes.
First of all, the last boss is like Mecha Hitler, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
And doesn't he
I
say-
guess if you... go ahead.
We're not. If people haven't played this by now, this is all on them. So I'm not even concerned about spoilers. Doesn't he say something when you kill him?
No. He says, Eva, auf Wiedersehen. And then he collapses into the goriest corpse in the game, which they deliberately wanted to do that, and I appreciate that.
Well, it's like the end of Bionic Commando.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good point.
Exploding
Wow.
Hitler's head, yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Now, the other...
Funny thing enough, Hitler's head is like the only thing left of his body in this game when you kill him.
Yeah, because that's because the bads needed it to go ahead and bring him back. So, Bionic Commando
yes,
is the sequel.
Wolfenstein 3D
Ah,
Cinematic Universe.
top secret Hitler's resurrection. Yeah, it's all connected. Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
And it would still work with the Modern Machine Games spin-offs. I will say Wolfenstein as a series is one of those things that gets better with each sequel. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, fantastic game. The unfortunately lost Wolfenstein '09, fantastic. And I've heard nothing but good things about the recent Machine Games. I don't know if they're I don't know which games they're sequels to. I don't know if they actually do count '09 as part of the canon or not, but
they do. As a matter of fact, there is one character who came from that game that came back in New Order. So,
nice.
And
shame no one can play it.
Yeah, files. You can play it, but yeah. No, actually, yeah. It may be a little bit loose, but Return to CW, Ravenstein, and the New Order games are all technically in the same continuity. It's very fuzzy and nebulous, but Wolfenstein 3D might even still be part of that continuity. There's probably going to be some retconning here and there and some fuzziness, but it maybe be passed off like that. I don't know, it depends.
Why don't we just throw the subject of my next question in?
What's up?
The only thing that reminded me of Wolfenstein to speak of, even though it's played more like Gauntlet, is a game called Into the Eagle's Nest. Which came out for the I think it was the Atari 800 computer. But it's basically Gauntlet, and you're killing Nazis.
Wow. That sounds
Now,
good.
what happens if you shoot the food?
I don't recall ever finding any food.
Okay.
They might have been rations packed in a box. I don't know. I haven't played a whole lot. This looks
like a precursor. Like, I know.
Wow.
It should be noted that Wolfenstein was supposed to be a sequel to the old Castle Wolfenstein, which was like more of a stealth action game. Mm-hmm. But I could also see one of them having played this game because there's similarities. Like, you collect treasures, you're mostly going through corridors killing Nazis. Mm-hmm. There are health pickups and other sort of things like that. Some of the iconography is just very similar, so I'm curious if they actually played this one or not, because it...
Holy shit, how have I never heard this game before? This looks great.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it either. It has an Apple II port as well.
You might have, but my memory is terrible. Still, cool.
The only thing about Into the Eagle's Nest is that the scrolling's a little jerky.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, but look,
It is what it is.
Exactly, but it's still pretty fun. You can get a little overwhelmed at times.
Yeah, it definitely looks more in line. It's like the missing link between the old Castle Wolfenstein games with 3D. So,
yeah.
Yes, and the company that made that also would go on as just a brief aside to make a game called Xenomorph, which was definitely the basis or inspiration for System Shock, because some of the weapons in that game are identical in terms of description, among other numerous features. It's just, I wish I could talk about it more, but that's beyond the scope of this.
And a good call on adding that to your ROM parade, Logan.
Nice. Very cool.
So,
very neat stuff. It's interesting to see how the Nazi killing pipeline in video games evolves, but just a little bit more to say about, because I mostly talk about the PC version instead of the console ports, but I did actually rent the SNES version a really long time ago, and yeah, it was iffy. The scrolling wasn't excellent. But I did get to play the sort of, well, not the Mac version, but a customized port of the Mac version on the PC a few years back, and that was quite fun. I'd say that maybe that campaign is more worth playing than the original PC version, if not just for the fact that it has the extra weapons, and it even brings in a few bosses from the kind of sequel/expansion pack to the original Spear of Destiny, interestingly enough.
Interesting. So it's like a greatest hits version.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, yes.
Sharon, did you step out for a minute? Because we've been talking about Wolfenstein 3D for like the past 10 minutes.
Yeah, also, there's this sort of weird naming thing where the '09 game was just called Wolfenstein, but technically there was no game that was just simply named Wolfenstein before, because the original was Castle Wolfenstein and the 1992 game was Wolfenstein 3D, so that's kind of bullshit, but it is what it is. But yeah, the SNES port, not great, but it certainly was a thing, although there is something pretty hilarious with it. Hitler's mustache was removed.
Yeah, that is pretty ridiculous.
He's turned over a new leaf. He's decided the toothbrush mustache, which was always trashy, is just gotta go.
Also, I don't think his name is Hitler. I forget.
Oh,
Master
Master
D.
Stott or something like
That,
yeah,
yes,
something like that.
Meister Stott was what he was called.
Master D. What? You're going to fight against me? You damn fool.
Damn fool. Also, just a little off-related thing, but there's also a rare mobile game actually worth talking about. There's a Wolfenstein RPG, which was sort of colloquial to the Doom RPGs. It apparently had a version of Hitler whose toothbrush mustache was moved to his chin, which people have dubbed Soul Patch Hitler, which is kind of fucking ridiculous and hilarious. It feels like something that Mel Brooks would make. I don't know.
You know,
Yes, it really does. Now that you mention it,
this whole thing about stashless Hitler here reminds me of a Marvel comic of all things.
Hey, I think I know which one you mean.
You might, actually. It's the one where Captain America goes to the Daily Bugle to confront J. Jonah Jameson. Because, he'd been insulting Spider-Man, but he's like, now, you listen to me. Okay, Spider-Man is not a menace. He and I were working together yesterday, and so on and so forth. And eventually the panels close in on JJJ's upper lip when Cap's talking to him. And he's like, I know what a real menace looks like. And he's just right on his little toothbrush stash there. And then the next day there's a retraction printed in the Bugle and big article about how Spider-Man and Captain America are heroes. And, then you see JJJ and he's watching Spider-Man swing past and he turns around. He's shaved.
That's pretty great. Very subtle. I love it.
I love how Captain America is one to call him on it.
Yeah, because apparently JJ actually does like and respect Cap. So,
Well, if you consider
nice
that, consider that JJJ was a junior reporter in World War II. So,
oh yeah. Oh wow, I actually forgot that bit about his backstory.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, let's take another aside here briefly. Let's talk about some naked fairies.
Okay.
It's Stormlord time.
Stormlord.
it's funny because I haven't played Stormlord, but I have played the sequel, which does keep up the naked fairy factor by a considerable degree.
Meanwhile, on the first version of that I played, the Genesis version, they're all covered up in like fur bikinis or something.
Ooh. Oh well. I wonder if that's different in the Japanese version.
I don't believe it is.
Probably
actually.
not.
No.
Is there a cheat code that removes that? There was some cheat code off for a Genesis game that added nudity to it, if I recall. Interestingly,
that was
but I don't know if it was Stormlord.
I think that was actually for the opening of Rings of Power. The girl in the Naughty
That's
Dog logo.
the one. Okay.
Yeah, really early ass Naughty Dog game. That's right.
But what someone did was go ahead and patch the Genesis game with the sprites from the uncensored release. So you can actually play Stormlord decensored.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Naked Fairies aside, that game always reminded me a little bit of Ghouls and Ghosts, but way, way, way harder.
Way more European.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it's got the teleport dungeon style map design from what I have seen. There's a lot of jumping around the map.
Oh no.
You get transported back and forth by eagle.
Yes.
And when you die, it's a really nice animation. So I have actually played the Amiga original in the past month or so.
Cool.
And I have to say, aside from the fact there's no music in the Amiga game, at least not to the best of my knowledge, that they're damn near identical. The Genesis apparently was the console of choice for Amiga ports.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yes.
Totally. I mean, it's hard.
Same processor.
Yes.
Yeah, same processor. The graphical chip is different, or the way the graphics work is a little bit different, but it still has the same number of colors in the palette, 64. So that made it really easy to do conversions.
Yeah, and Electronic Arts especially pumped out a slew of them. Razorsoft.
Like our good pal
Say what?
Sorry, I was going to say our good pal and friend. You mentioned it earlier, and then I lost my complete Sword of Sodan. There you go.
Oh yeah,
everybody
Sword of
loves that
Sodan.
one.
That
Yeah.
fucking shit.
They love
But
it so much.
Razorsoft handled Stormlord.
Yeah, they handled Stormlord, and they also handled Technocop.
The kid killing game.
Yep.
That's how I fucking remember it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's basically it. You know, when you jump out of your car for the first time and go into the building to hunt down the guys, there's a kid doing jumping jacks. You can shoot him.
Jesus Christ. Oh, man.
But
What a time.
there were a couple other companies that were doing Amiga ports too, but Electronic Arts by far were the biggest ones. So
Yes, I do appreciate how the Genesis was more of a catch-all for Western developers, American and European at the time. Even if I'm biased and I don't like most of the games they made back then, it was still pretty cool to get an idea of what developers the world around were doing at the time.
oh yeah.
As for Stormlord itself, I really haven't played this one very much, if at all, but I do think it has some pretty bitchin' art design.
Oh, definitely.
Although your guy looks kind of slovenly for a protagonist, is he just like a really old Viking or whatever? And where does clothes go?
He's even more naked in the sequel Deliverance, if you can believe it. He doesn't even have a cape.
This is true.
Well. But I can definitely see the ghouls and ghosts connection here. I never really fiddled with this one much. Maybe I should play it more.
If you want a challenge, go for it.
It's hard, huh?
Yeah.
Very, yeah. Might be beyond my skill ability, especially if it has the same Turrican health where you don't get much invincibility. I don't know if that's how that works.
Well, it's you don't get a lot of invincibility, as I recall.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oof.
But, you know, it is what it is. So
that's all that it is.
Pretty much, that's basically just an aside. So let's jump into another one as long as we're thinking about it.
Sure.
Another early Amiga port that I played for the Genesis. My friend Bob had actually gotten it. That game would be Battle Squadron, the sequel to Hybris. I think it was
Yes, that's a really good game.
Hard as hell too. I mean, no surprise. And
yes, very tough.
What I personally think is a cardinal sin for a shooter: the popcorn enemies don't just pop when you shoot them. It takes a few hits. Called popcorn enemies.
It's also one of those games where every weapon you have. I think you have like 5 weapons you can cycle between.
Yeah.
Every single weapon takes like forever to power up, and then if you die, you lose all of your levels. So it's back to like your pea shooter, basically.
Yeah, and it is vastly difficult. You go underground in certain. It's an overhead shooter, so it starts off like your kind of 1942 game, and then when you go into the underground, it's just the same perspective but harder. And even with I had borrowed Bromley's Mega joystick, the Mega arcade stick at one point that had turbo fire. Still couldn't do anything in that game. I even tried to Game Genie it once and couldn't do it. That's bad.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a neat shooter, but it is just too hard for its own good. I couldn't tell you about the Amiga original. I haven't played it.
I have played all 3. There's 3 versions of this, actually. So there's the Amiga original, which is pretty good. There's the Genesis version, which is actually slightly different. I think some of the graphics are changed around, enhanced. They mess around a little bit more with the balance. Then there was a very briefly available HD remake, I believe, of the Amiga version that was on Steam for, I believe, like a year. And I snagged that thing as soon as it hit, and they hit a rights issue. I don't know what the deal with it is. I guess they didn't have the rights to remaster it, so they were forced to take it off, but I still own it. And it's a good port. It's probably the best version. I think it has difficulty settings. I was actually able to beat it.
Really?
I don't know if that's because the Amiga version's easier or just because I was using a difficulty select. I forget how it works, but it's a really good game. Especially if you can, once you've kind of figured it out. if I recall, the game's setup works a little bit like that one. I believe it's that Capcom game where you're like a winged warrior and you have to sometimes travel underground, but there's
Legendary
an overworld
Wings.
too.
Yeah, Legendary Wings.
Yes, Legendary Wings. That's the one. It's kind of like that. There is an overworld you can go around and scroll around, but you do need to enter like certain points underground to defeat bosses.
Yep.
And then I can't remember. I think those areas are devoid of power-ups or other things that really help. So you have to be ready to do so. And I think until you do, you have to keep scrolling the map over and over again. It's an interesting setup. You know, you're kind of trying to build up strength so you can take on the bosses. And, you know, you have a bunch of different weapons that each perform different sort of functions. Although I think there are a couple that are like almost exactly the same or kind of similar, but it's a solid game. It's definitely very tough. I wish I could recommend the best version of the game, which is that HD remake, but alas, again, it is no longer available.
Yeah. You're bringing back a lot of memories, because I'd forgotten a lot of this.
Yeah, I played it within the last, oh gosh, I think it's actually been close to 10 years since I last played it, because I think it came out in like 2015, and they took it off the store within months or even just a year. And I had played the Genesis version before that point, and then later the Amiga version tried it out, couldn't get anywhere. So it was very nice being able to just get through that, for them to have tuned the difficulty the way they did. I'm trying to think what else to really note about the game. It's actually one of the few Euro shmups I would recommend to just about anyone, along with games like Tyrion, and there's one other one that I think is really good, but the name escapes me at the moment.
It's not Hybris, is it? Or are you thinking of maybe that
Hybris
game?
is also pretty dang good. That is actually also a pretty solid game, but I couldn't get it as far into that one.
Is it Xenon 2 that you're thinking of?
Or maybe
Xenon 2 is also not bad. That one also got a decent Genesis port, if I recall. I think there were some issues with it where it wasn't quite as good, but
what about the bug game, Mike?
that one's also not bad.
Bug game? Huh?
Yeah, starts with an A. Can't think of the title.
Apidia.
Yeah, that one.
The B game. Yes.
That one's also good too. That is also a solid game.
That is also a 100% Amiga exclusive that never got any ports, damn it.
Yeah, it sucks.
Oh well. Anyway, I unfortunately know extremely little about Battle Squadron. I've not played this one at all, I think. That being said, looking it up, it does seem like what you see is what you get here. It's
Pretty much.
pretty straightforward, solid overhead shooter that definitely looks worth a spin. Its overall design is reminding me of some other game. I want to maybe say Veritex, but maybe not that one. I don't know.
Veritex is a little more Japanese in its design. It's like the only thing. One of the big problems I have is that the ship in Battle Squadron is rather large.
Yeah.
Yes,
the
that's an Amiga. That's a Euro shmup trademark.
Well, yeah, the hitbox can really make or break a game like this. I know that, for example, Zombie Nation has a massive ass hitbox on your floating samurai zombie head, but at least you can take a lot of hits. I forget in Battle Squadron, how much damage can you take, if any?
I think you might have a health bar, but you die pretty dang quick, even if that's the case. It's definitely a game that is very unforgiving.
Bogus.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well.
Oh yeah, completely.
Sounds unforgiving for the time, so it is what it is.
Yeah. So anyway, let's move on to one of the other games we wanted to talk about. Maniac Mansion.
Hello.
Okay, this is the Mike Power Hour here now.
Basically, yes, because I have very little experience with Maniac Mansion. I think I played both the NES and the Famicom ports briefly. Couldn't do jack in the Famicom port, but I got a couple screens into the NES port.
Well, this is pretty ironic because for the most part, I'm actually
Hey, Prime's here. Just in time for the Mike Power Hour.
Oh, well, no, I really got to perform here. I mean, Prime's a good friend.
Oh, yeah, he's already grabbing the popcorn, too. That's good.
Yep.
Well, shit. All right, well, first off, I want to say this is pretty ironic because I feel like that while I know of a lot of graphic adventures, I genuinely haven't played a lot of them because I am dumb. Puzzles are not usually my dig, and many of these games also tend to be brutal and unforgiving as per, the old Sierra model of you forgot to click on this one pixel like 2 hours ago, now you can't fucking beat the game. I fucking hate that shit.
As I understand it, Maniac Mansion is very brutal, especially if you're a hamster.
Well, I wanted to say, and this feels like bias. Call this company dick sucking if you want. Feel free to call me out and it's Snarb. But the only 90% of the graphic adventure games I have gotten into are those made by LucasArts. I don't know if it's just due to their overall quirky design or the fact that they are, for the most part, generally less heinous than Sierra or most other adventure makers of the time. But I know what
the real reason is.
What's
Come
up?
on. It's clearly Indiana Jones and Sam and Max.
Actually, yeah, those are two really huge race in its favor. So,
yes, I need to play Sam and Max someday. That's definitely on my playlist.
Sam Max Hit the Road's a fucking great game. Indiana Jones: The Fate of Atlantis is a fucking great game. The Last Crusade adventure game, while kind of rough compared to Fate of Atlantis, is still pretty damn good.
We just don't talk about their action output.
Ooh, no, I almost forgot that was a thing. Bogus. But, yes, Maniac Mansion is actually not LucasArts' very, very first adventure game. That was actually a game based on Labyrinth, the Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie crotch rocket movie.
You remind me of the Babe. The Babe with the power. The power of voodoo.
I admit I still need to see that movie. I'm sorry.
You have not watched Labyrinth?
Good. You definitely do need to see it.
Somehow I haven't, no.
And I'm just now finding this out?
Uh-oh.
You knew that.
I did not, actually.
Well, fuck.
Get on it, Mike.
Revelations abound on tonight's exciting episode of Dyer's Place.
Dude, my sister has watched that movie, and she wanted nothing to do with it. I thought for sure you would have watched it by now.
I've been more of a series watchy than a movie watching mood, but I will try and find time for it soon. So.
Oh, there you go. That's
anyway. Maniac Mansion, however, while not the first adventure game by LucasArts, is the first one to run on their patented SCUM engine. And I'm wishing I remember what the hell that stood for now. I gotta look this up.
Yeah, it's a silly acronym.
Oh, yes. Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion. So, yes, MM is the bed...
Nintendo made them take every reference to SCUM out because it said SCUM.
That's apparently another word for the thing that males generate when blah, 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 BBD-boo. I'm not going to say anymore.
Pretty much.
Way of putting it, but yes. But, yes. So Maniac Mansion was the bedrock for what we get later. Dak McCracken, which was also a really rough game. The Indiana Jones games, Loom, the Monkey Island series, etc., etc. Yes, that's the right way to say it. Memo bis punitor delicatum. Anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Waka.
Thank you, yes. So Maniac Mansion, basic premise is basically like an 80s sort of horror comedy wherein a group of, they're apparently teenagers, although, at least in the original PC versions, they look quite a bit older just due to their somewhat weird big-headed art style, but... Dave's girlfriend, Sandy, is kidnapped by a Dr. Fred Edison and imprisoned in his giant, elaborate mansion, him being a mad scientist, who is currently taking orders from a mysterious organism from space. His family is also now evil, Nurse Edna and Weird Ed, as well as his pets, the green and purple tentacles. They're just separate tentacles who managed to waddle on their own power for some reason.
Oh, but they got their own day in the sun later.
Yes, they would. You're correct. You're correct. But, yes, so the premise is that Dave and two of his friends out of a pool of 6, you get to choose which two, come along to explore the mansion, see what they can do to rescue Sandy, and this is actually a pretty neat and innovative thing that no other future LucasArts adventure, or most adventure games would really have, but each character has their own special skill sets that allow them to get through certain humps that you need to overcome in order to beat the game. Like, Razor and Sid are musicians, and they're able to help Green Tentacle out with his fledgling music career. Bernard is a computer whiz and can rig gadgets to contact the Intergalactic Meteor Police. Michael works in photography. I know the concept of dark rooms are totally dead. This game is very 80s. But he's able to develop certain photos that... I forget exactly what they did, but they help you out somehow. And Wendy's a writer, if I'm not mistaken, and she can help publish a manuscript that will be helpful. Like, all sorts of wacky things that you can't need to do. Jeff was completely worthless because what he did, Bernard could also do, but more. So Jeff was kind of like the hard mode if you wanted to go with it. Bernard was notably very scared of the green tentacles, so you just can't pass by him, but he's probably the most diverse. And probably the most definitely the most popular of the Maniac Mansion characters, which I'll get into later. But yeah, it really has a sort of like comedy sort of designation to it. Like, it feels like a tribute to movies like Midnight Madness or oh god, not Porky's. This isn't exactly a teen sex comedy, but I'm trying to think of. It definitely has some influences. I'm just trying to think of what, but my brain's totally fucking.
The premise actually sounds very vaguely like Rocky Horror Picture Show as well.
Yes,
with the kidnapping and whatnot.
That is a little bit, I'd say, maybe a bit of an influence. It's obviously much less fucking weird and sexually charged than Rocky Horror, but I can see a little bit of its DNA in there. But yes. So yeah, you gotta explore the mansion, and it is, I think, relatively shorter than some of their future games. Really, you can beat the game in potentially like half an hour if you know what to do, but being that you can select other characters going into it, there is some replay value. The one caveat is that you always have to bring Dave with you, and Dave honestly doesn't have any special abilities. He kind of sucks. That being said, there's this weird quirk with the game that if caught by Nurse Edna, they will be chucked into the dungeon. However, like, there's a way to escape the dungeon that requires one of the kids to stay behind, so for, like, 95% of the game, Dave will be the dungeon bitch just helping the other kids get out, and then that's pretty much the designation I gave him, because there's really no other reason to do anything else when the other teens can actually have abilities that can advance, so...
Doesn't Nurse Edna want to do some questionable things in that game?
Does, yes. I want to say the SNES script maybe toned that down a bit, but my memory is fuzzy.
Wait, that came out on the Super NES?
Did I say SNES? Shit. Well...
Yeah, you had me confused there for a sec.
Sorry, stupid cough, goddammit. But yeah, I have played the original PC version, DOS version, what have you. Like, it's come out in other collections, and the Scum VM emulator is very useful, but I am much more used to the NES version, which I grew up playing, which obviously, since you're not using a computer mouse, maybe is a little bit iffier to control, but it mostly comes by still pretty well, all things considered. It's actually a really quality port, like nowhere near as botched as the terrible port of King's Quest V on the NES, if anyone remembers that.
Yes, shit. That's very dubious.
Even I remember how bad that one was, and I barely played it.
So, yes, Exhibit A on why LucasArts was superior to Sierra. No, I'll shut up. Anyway. Yeah.
Oh, wait, I have a quick question, Mike. How does it compare to the bootleg NES port of Darkseid in terms of how accurate it is?
It's a much better game. Like, duh.
I have a different question, though.
What's up?
Didn't Maniac Mansion have its own TV show?
Oh,
yes!
Yeah. That was a bizarre oddity that I think it was, like, had almost fucking nothing to actually do with the game at all. It's probably a very weird slice of sitcom ephemera, but, you know, it is said that it was created by George Lucas. Let me see. While Maniac
It had 3 seasons and 66 episodes. That's impressive.
What?
But
Yeah.
apparently the show is only about the Edisons. None of the other characters show up for whatever reason.
Yeah, I had no idea it had that many episodes. I thought this was canceled after 1 season. Is this some sort of Mandalorian bullshit?
So wait, who played the tentacles?
I don't know if the tentacles were in the show, actually.
Actually, yes, Prime. I was going to bring that up. Dr. Fred Edison himself is played by the now, unfortunately, recently deceased Joe Flaherty of SCTV fame. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, sir.
Oh.
But I never saw a single episode of the show. I got the impression it was not very well received. But if it got 3 seasons, I don't know, maybe it's worth checking. Oh, wow, this is fucking bonkers. Apparently, David fucking Cronenberg guest starred as himself on an episode. Am I reading this right? What the fuck?
Yep, Mike's gone full blue, folks.
Hopefully that's
He's
not
gone
like one of those
bye-bye.
rumors like the Bloodalizer or something here. Like, oh yeah, David Cronenberg just casually showed up on this show you've never seen or heard of.
I mean, he has acted occasionally. He was the villain in Nightbreed, but let me see.
That's true.
Video clip: David Cronenberg in Maniac Mansion.
No, actually, yeah, Wikipedia lists it. He was in episode 19 of the 2nd season, Adela's Breakdown, or Adea's, I'm not sure. It's that.
This actually happened. This is such a rabbit hole. Holy shit.
Does he talk
Apparently
about?
so.
Does he talk about the weird flesh monsters he makes in a lot of his early movies?
I wish. I'm going to say no. I'm going to guess that the sitcom was fairly G to PG, but not actually having seen it, I really couldn't tell you much about it. At any rate, the impression I got was that it was incredibly far removed from the game upon which it is based.
So no
but yeah,
throwing
as for the
hamsters
game-
in microwaves, huh?
oh yes, infamous feature of the original game that I think actually somehow made it on the NES version. Actually, I forget if that was Bowdlerized or not. Oh, I don't remember. No,
I
I
thought
think
you couldn't put the hamster in the microwave in the NES version. I thought it said something about doing that.
probably. But in the original PC version, you could do that if you just want to be a total bastard. It does not go unpunished, because if you do that, his owner, Weird Ed, gets extremely fucking mad and murders you off screen, which, honestly, I can't blame the guy, you fucking asshole. If that happens, yes, your teen actually dies, and it becomes much harder, if not impossible, to beat the game. Maniac Mansion was actually made before LucasArts, basically had a no-fail state rule that they instituted in Loom onward, except for that one Easter egg in Secret of Monkey Island, but...
Now,
So,
one thing
you
I
can't
wanted to-
actually die and lose and or get into dead ends in this game.
2 things I wanted to bring up.
What's up?
If I remember correctly, one of the early prototypes of the NES port was leaked a while back, and you actually can put the hamster in the microwave. I think
That sounds right.
I think it also has the nude statues and references to Scum still there.
Yeah, there were a few things that were removed from it, yes.
And the other thing is in the Famicom version.
The weird-ass fan. Yes, yeah.
The ending actually shows your characters flying around clouds with angel wings.
If all of the teens die, then yes, you get a legitimate game over screen that has them in heaven.
Yep.
And also, notably, the Famicom version looks very weirdly different from even the NES, the Western version. Oops, hang on. The Western version I'd like to post a video of. While the sprites in the Western NES version do look softer, so to speak, compared to the original PC versions, they look just downright cute in the Famicom version. It almost seems like a completely different game. All the graphics are redrawn. Everyone is weirdly smiley
Did
in
you ever-
this game.
Did you ever see what they did to a boy and his blob in Japan?
I'm not sure if I did, actually.
Well, you know how in the original NES game, the boy is just like a nondescript looking kid, right?
He sure is a boy, yes.
Yeah. Well, in the Japanese version, he's been very cutified. I think he's wearing a backwards baseball cap, a backpack, which is much bigger than the one that on the NES port. And The blob looks the same, though.
Oh, that is weird. Fushigi Nablabi. Yeah, he does look different. You are right.
Now that's a name.
Yeah.
But the boy is the only thing that has changed. All the weird semi-realistic graphics are still intact. This is bizarre.
I owned it for a time, so I got to experience that firsthand.
Oh, wow. Neat. I also remember offhand that the Japanese version of Police Quest 2 had all the characters look very anime-ish. Like, your chief had big eyes and purple, like, afro hair or something like that.
It was very how to draw anime for Western audiences kind of anime. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So,
but yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just one also thing I want to mention offhand, and I know this is something that sort of irritates Snarb, but I remember that the Scum engine was notable as a counterpoint to the text parser that Sierra and most other adventure games had at the time by just completely eliminating the parser and instead boiling your actions down to a set of pre-cooked commands that you'd select from a sub-menu on the bottom of the screen, like push, open, pick up, use, unlock, etc. Quite a few of these commands, however, were redundant and or just fairly situational for a few.
Or they were very persnickety about them. You had to, you couldn't... You had to push or pull a drawer. You couldn't open the drawer. You know, that's an example I can think of. But to be okay, as you note, there are actually precursors to the Scum verb box. Notably, the Labyrinth game actually had a pre-selected set of verbs that you could combine with various different other phrases. And I think there were a couple other adventure games, text adventures, that actually did the same thing. They basically had a verb command list. And then you could combine that with items.
Self.
yeah, like the Mac Adventures.
I remember that from Shadowgate, just being bored and trying that one day, and it's like, you drive the sword into yourself. Suicide won't help on your quest.
I just realized, maybe we should have had one of those on here. Oh well.
That's no biggie.
No, we actually do have a graphic adventure stream coming up.
That is true, yes.
Mm-hmm. So we'll go into more detail about
something else. Sorry,
that's all right. Go ahead.
Something else I wanted to quickly note is that Day of the Tentacle actually references the television show very obliquely with a certain plot point that and puzzle you have to solve.
Really?
Oh, wow, really?
Yes. It involves collecting royalties from said show, and it's very interesting how you solve that puzzle.
I vaguely... Oh, yeah, I think I remember that. It has... Oh, it's been a while since I have played that one, but that is pretty neat. Yes, I'm not sure how many people have played Maniac Mansion all in all. They probably did. It was on the NES version. For as prototypical as it is, though, it did have some ideas that weren't really explored in future LucasArts games, and I do appreciate for that. That being said, it did very notably get a sequel several years later, Day of the Tentacle, which actually stars Bernard as the main character now, with his new roommates Ogie and Laverne. And I do want to note this, that, the game is now fully voice-acted, several professional VAs at the time, with... Most notably, Richard Sanders was the voice of Bernard, if you can believe it.
Really?
Les Nessman himself, yes.
Okay, I gotta look up a long play of this just to hear him playing someone other than Les.
Yes, totally, it is worth it. It is also arguably my favorite LucasArts adventure game, although it is kind of close to Sam & Max. I know Snarb wasn't as enthused with Dot, but it does have some pretty bullshitty logic areas.
Paints. Yes.
Yeah. I'll give you that. It is maybe a bit more out there in some cases. Quite a few LucasArts games are to an extent. I will say, what would be the most... I do think Sam & Max is somewhat more bizarre in some areas, but, potato. As it were, though, I do find it amusing how the Scum engine, throughout its evolution, kind of eliminated some commands that were redundant, and then really sized things down to the point that in their latter Scum games, you only have, 4 or 5 constant commands that are represented by icons. But I do appreciate that shearing down, because it was kind of annoying to have to distinguish between which ones you actually really needed. So,
Eugene has entered the chat.
hey, Eugene, what's up, man? I think I was at the end of babbling about Maniac Mansion and brief, vague history-ish of LucasArts' other adventure. Well, not that far, but that'd be a huge rabbit hole to get into. What else can I say about Mansion?
I don't know.
feel like I babble a lot.
All I know is we had just 2 more games to go over, and we're basically done. So,
Nice.
that said, now that Eugene has entered the chat, how's it going?
Oh yeah, one more thing I actually did want to mention, and actually kind of part of the reason why I prefer the NES port is that the NES port actually has a soundtrack provided by composer George Sanger, the Fat Man, as he's also known as. I think most famous for the Wing Commander series, if I'm not mistaken. And every teen has their own theme when you play as them, and there's actually some pretty catchy tracks in there. I quite like Michael's, especially Flashbulb Funk, as it was called. You actually get the title of the song if you look at your CD player in your inventory. If, however, the music annoys you, you can actually turn it off at any time, and I guess, play that more like the original PC versions, which didn't have a soundtrack to them, for the most part, but... So, yeah.
Anyway, we got one more side to cover here. I really would like to cover this because I did spend some time playing it back in the early 90s, at least on the Genesis. That would be Starflight.
Sorry, I zoned out for a second. Yes, the Genesis version. I did cursory research on this one. This was another one that kind of went over my head, but by all accounts, the Genesis version is the best version. It actually has proper planetary exploration among numerous other features, while still maintaining the exact same mechanics. It's almost like a precursor to Mass Effect in some ways, the way the lander and stuff works, and some of the other plot points, along with Star Control 2 on that note.
Sorry, give me just a second here.
No worries. So, Mike, how's about that Starflight? You're the #1 Super Starflight fan here, correct?
Oh yeah, he's a big Super Starflight fan.
Yeah, he could tell us everything about its development and all the characters and the races.
This is just an aside anyway, so we're not going into that kind of detail.
Fun fact, little behind the scenes inside baseball here. Starflight was actually on our main bill, but I pushed to get Pirates in its place because this game looked way too complicated for me, and I really didn't want to have to cover it extensively, so I'm sorry, I've got dick and shit for this one.
It's actually not quite as complicated as it seems. There is some money management you have to do, as well as picking crew members, but it's otherwise straightforward. It's kind of... I guess Rob can explain a little bit more.
Well, basically, it's essentially Star Trek. There's no two ways about it. It is very much a Star Trek kind of game.
Well, that's cool.
It has Vulcans in it, doesn't it?
If not Vulcans, pretty close to it. Now, I used to watch my brother play this one all the time, and he actually finished it. So there is an ending.
Some of them.
If I remember correctly, you have to find some kind of ancient monolith or something, or you have to find the original Earth or something like that. Because you don't start off from Earth. You start from, Earth.
That sounds very Hitchhiker's Guide-y to me.
Yeah, well, there's something about one of those two things. That much I do remember. But when I played it myself, I would, first basically, I'd crew my ship. You could name it, name your crew members, all that good stuff. Made sure I had fuel. Would go out and just start mining the different planets in the first solar system. Eventually, you get enough minerals you'd find. You bring it back to the starbase. You go ahead and sell those, get more money, buy more fuel, more upgrades for your little mining lander thing. And eventually you could actually start exploring the stars. Now, I distinctly remember one time that I just kept pushing on. And by the time I realized my fuel was almost gone, it was too late. I was, out in the middle of nowhere.
Whoops.
So I'm just kind of sitting there. Yay. But the interesting thing is you do actually bump into other races as you go out. And You actually can assume one of three postures with them. One is just like friendly, another one is hostile, and another one is obsequious. So, and there's one race in particular, I can't remember who it is, but if you don't treat them like that, they will get pissed and try to destroy your ship. And in the Genesis game, the combat occurs in real time, which is nice. It actually kind of reminds me of Star Control a little bit.
That's another reason why I relegated this one to the asides. I thought it strayed a little too close to Star Control, so,
Well, there's definitely a big difference between the two of them, but the combat is pretty close.
Oh, that's cool.
Let's see, I did look up a video of the original PC version. Aside from the hub on the space station looking quite a bit different, it actually looks a bit more plain, yet more detailed in the Genesis version. But anyway, it definitely looks more primitive because obviously you're dealing with 80s computer technology versus late 80s 16-bit console technology.
That makes sense.
So, but there's a lot of planets to explore. There's a lot of game to go through. You basically have to unravel the clues as you're going along and whatnot. But it does eventually end. But in other words, you will be. How's that go, Mike?
How's what go?
A 5-year mission
Oh yes.
to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where apparently other people have gone before, but because you're not coming from the original Earth, you're coming from some kind of a Earth-like planet called Earth.
Honestly, it sounds more like you're playing Voyager than classic Trek.
Well, you don't get lost in space though.
Okay, fair enough.
It's like you're not chucked 75,000 light years away or whatever it is.
And you have to deal with poor rip-off Klingons in your first couple years, but I digress.
We don't talk about the Kazon. Unless it's that bit from Lower Decks.
Yes. Lower Decks is always valid to reference.
This is how we kick ass in the Delta Quadrant.
We'll always have Tom Paris.
Yes. But it's a decent game if you like that kind of thing. See, Eugene knows what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I do have to admit, I wish that I had more of the focus to concentrate on this one, but I only have enough mental resources to do one game like this, and I chose to focus more on Populous, so I'm sorry that I have diddly dick for this one. I am looking up some footage of the Genesis version, though, and it does seem pretty nice. It almost kind of seems like something of a midpoint between the two Star Controls, in that it has a more exploratory quest mode that is more along the lines of what would become Star Control 2's main mode, but it doesn't seem quite as elaborate. Nonetheless,
Well,
it does seem pretty neat, all things considered.
it is. You should see the size of the Genesis instruction manual it comes with, though. It's huge.
Oh dear. There's probably a reason why I passed on that one then. I had enough trouble reading the SNES Populous manual, so for some time anyway. The images helped.
Yet my
My
brother
focus is
finished it.
terrible.
I do not know how Ryan finished that, but he did.
That's pretty amazing. I don't think I would have had the patience to put up with this one. It looks
But then
pretty
again,
high concept for a game from the 80s.
consider this. We're all talking about the same guy who loved the Tales of the Three Kingdoms games.
Yes,
those are what they're called,
good
right?
on him. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but yes.
Yeah. Well, you knew what I was talking about. Yeah, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms games. And he finished, I think, every one he played.
What? That's nuts! Holy shit!
If he was alive today, he'd probably be on here talking about those with us.
Oh wow, that would be pretty great. Did he ever beat Nobunaga's Ambition?
I think he did.
God damn.
He went heavy into strategy games and whatnot.
I don't think I know anyone who's ever beaten a single one of those, to be honest.
Well, I did. It's like, you go ahead and have fun with that, Ryan. I'm going to stick with my shooters.
Yeah, I'll just play Contra 3 and get pissed off at the asshole in the middle of stage 3 for the 17th time or so.
Yeah, although he didn't just play all that. He played plenty of other games too.
Yeah,
He just wasn't a fan of shooters, to speak of.
that's fair. That's fair.
He liked the occasional one, but he really liked platformers. He was a big fan of Elisa Dragoon.
That's a good one. That's one that I could actually stand to play more myself.
And he loved brawlers too.
Yes. Beat 'em ups are always a good deal.
Mm-hmm. He's a big fan of the Golden Axe series.
Rad. Very
So,
rad.
well, that's pretty much all we're going to say about that one. So let's move on to our final game. And I've been saving this for last because I know Mike and Snarp have a lot to say about it. Whereas I just have experience with a couple of the console ports. And I think I played the PC port once back when it was just like a shareware demo or something like that. It was really in the early 90s. I know that much. We are, of course, talking about Wood. Doom.
Dude.
It's a mood, even.
Dude. Woof. Woom. Woomy. I don't know.
There is actually a port of Doom called Woof, by the way,
Really?
which is itself based. Doom has such a weird history, but one of the ports was called Marine's Best Friend because the only thing the port really did is add a dog, which was the graphics were taken from Wolfenstein. I have no idea why. This is just how weird early Doom port development was, but that's well beyond the scope of this. So I started off playing Doom, the shareware version. Then I had a pirated copy of Doom 2, and then I somehow got, I think, a box copy of the Ultimate Doom, and then I didn't get proper Doom 2 too much later. But in any case, I had played a few of the console ports of this, notably the 32X version, which, for what it is actually surprisingly solid, despite having a lot of cut content. And, well, the music speaks for itself, as I'm sure Mike would note.
Grindy buzzsaws and bibbity baps.
It's all
Don't
toilet
forget the
noises.
farts, man. It's yes.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, second most farts in the system besides the Danger Room music and X-Men.
Now, you want to hear something crazy about that particular port?
What's that?
That is the port that actually got me to appreciate Doom a little bit.
I remember that. That happened fairly recently, actually.
In the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And then they ended up doing that. Why did I say wood? Because if you hold the Doom disc upside down, it reads wood.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've seen the logo altered in many different ways to much hilarious effect, but
But what I was saying is that the 32X one has been hacked into a much, much better port.
yeah.
Yeah, at that point, it's a full reprogramming. Much better music. I think it has most, if not all, of the stages from at least the original 3 episodes. I don't know if they ever added in the Ultimate Doom episode, Thy Flesh Consumed. But there's actually other ports of it, too, that do different things. One tries to have all the levels in there. I think one is attempting to port over levels from Doom 2, or like the master levels, or some of the other ports of Doom. It's really fascinating what they've done to the 32X port. They've really rehabilitated it.
And as an aside, I remember Ryan had gotten a hold of the Super NES Doom when it came out. Just so happened, there's part of the story.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it just so happened at the same time I'd gotten a hold of the PC Engine Dracula X.
Ooh, nice.
So I had a couple friends of mine over, and showing them the game. And you know that scene in the first stage where you fight the giant rock golems?
Yeah, those guys that look intimidating but are actually pretty easy.
Well, you remember how they roar when they die, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Well, I had everything routed to my set of 80s knock the pictures off the wall speakers.
Ooh, nice.
So the first time I killed one of those things, we get this, wall shaking. Roar. And one of my friends, a guy named Dave, he kind of looks back where he can see out of my room and into the living room where Ryan was playing Doom. And he's like, huh, take that, Doom. It's like, yeah, I can shake pictures off the wall with this thing. And actually, I ended up doing that with the Super NES Gradius 3 as well. The boss explosions can do the same thing. Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, that is a big sound they do. The boss explosions in Axelay too. That's a nice
Yes,
sound.
that's another one. Well, I routed everything through my stereo at the time.
Sweet.
I had the speakers for it. Why not?
Yeah, why the hell not?
But anyway, go on.
I do appreciate that you finally got on the Doom train, at least to an extent. Before then, would you care to explain how you regarded Doom?
Oh, I'd love to.
Please do.
Doom confused the hell out of me. Because once I was done killing every enemy I could find, I could never find my way to the exit. So I'm wandering around lost, probably going in circles. And just, I swear to God, I felt like a rat in a maze, and I was going to turn a corner and find a big piece of cheese. And if I recall correctly, Perfect Dark actually made that happen at one point.
Yeah, they put actual cheese as a nice little wink in every... Apparently the cheese was actually going to unlock secrets, but that didn't happen in the final version.
Nope, so you're just a rat in a maze.
Yep,
Despite all my rage.
Yes.
Exactly.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, too easy, too predictable. But I know that occasionally, whenever I yawn about FPSs, you just shut me down with "Where's the cheese?" and I give you a dirty look.
Throw the cheese.
But I mean, as the progenitor of like almost every single first-person shooter going forward, to the extent that before the genre was even called FPS, games of its ilk were known as Doom clones on the whole.
Or Doom killers, too. Don't forget that.
Doom
Did
clones,
any of
you
them
mean along the lines of the original Dark Forces?
Yes.
Yes.
Dark Forces would very much qualify under that banner. Dark Forces is a damn good one. But
Yeah, despite the Star Wars setting, I still get lost in that one.
I will say that while I mostly like that game, the third stage is fucking balls. That's one of the worst, maybe the second worst sewer level in FPS history besides Redneck Rampage.
Isn't that the one where you have to mess with all the sluice gates and you have to go up and down the slime tunnels or something?
Right, yeah.
It's really bad. It's that's the worst part of that game.
Can't the Empire?
Gets much
just build
better
something
afterward
straightforward?
if you can. Yeah, gets much better afterwards if you can survive it. Anyway, but yes, I am also quite a fan of Doom myself. That is, alongside Wolfenstein 3D, maybe a game that I shouldn't have been playing when I was like 5 or 6 years old, to the extent that I didn't understand that all the gruesome sprites of like hanging bodies and impaled skulls on spikes were, I just simply called them decorations. I didn't really know what they were. In a way, they kind of are.
Well, you're not wrong, actually. That's what they're called, I think, in code and stuff.
Yeah, just the flavor text. I mean, honestly, Doom's, like, for its time, 93, Doom was considered a gory ass game. And to be fair, whenever you hit one of the fodder enemies with a rocket and their body just totally chunks out, short of anything in Mortal Kombat, that was probably considered a very shocking thing back for its time.
93, you say?
Yeah, 1993.
Yes.
The end of the year, December 10th. But,
Interesting. So basically, that came out the same year as Splatterhouse 3. But
it did, yes.
Whereas
yes,
Splatterhouse was
right.
ending, Doom was just beginning.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. That's exactly the case. And yes, Doom for its entirety had been subject to much hemming and hawing from moral guardians. Please think of the children.
Please think of the children.
Ellen Lovejoy bitch types, yeah. But the game was a massive seller. It had already built up a lot of goodwill with Wolfenstein 3D, and Doom was just sort of built upon the bones of that. But everything was more. There was actual dimensions to the levels. There was a lot more variety in the enemies than just guys who shoot you and the occasional dog. You got a lot more weapons, of course. It codified the concept of the FPS arsenal having different ammo types for most, if not all, weapons. It, Wolfenstein 3D certainly advanced the genre forward from its forebears, but Doom was like the
codifier, the trendsetter for almost everything else in the genre at the time that would come after it. Granted, a few games did some things different, like Rise of the Triad with its unique weapon system where the missile weapons are relatively ephemeral, and I remember reading some sort of magazine or whatever that thought that there's Bullfrog Software again, that their game Magic Carpet was also kind of sort of an FPS. I haven't really played that one much, but I know that one's
not really. It's more of a flight sim sort of strategy game. It has some elements you can play it in first. I think you do play it in first person and you can shoot stuff, but there's almost nothing tying the two besides that.
Let me redirect a little bit back here.
Sure.
I only played Doom on the PC for like 3 minutes. I have had far more experience with the console ports, even if it isn't a lot. So, what was the first port of Doom that came out that pretty closely matched the PC original?
That would be the Jaguar port, which was the standard for so many of the ports afterward. The PlayStation port, I believe, was based off of it. And a bunch of other ones too, I believe. But interestingly, there were a couple of ports that were, I think, either programmed by id themselves or had id's involvement. Like, I think id directly did the 32X version, and they were involved with the Saturn version as well, which, no, I think the Saturn version was also based off the Jaguar port board. Infamously, Carmack actually told them not to program the Saturn version a specific way, which means the game ran like ass. It could have actually ran much better if they had programmed it differently, if Carmack hadn't put his foot down over it. He didn't want the graphics to be slightly wobbly, I think was the trade-off. And he got a stick up his butt about that. So that version is worse than it should be. The Jaguar version was the first of the good ports that tried to match it, but even it wasn't one-to-one. The PlayStation was even better than that. The first port to actually be almost a direct translation, I believe, was like for the Xbox. Either I think it came with Doom 3 or something like that.
It did, yes. I actually did get that back in the day.
And then there was the expansion to Doom 3, which had Doom 2 with it, I believe, or something along those lines. There was some sort of thing with that. And that was the very first time after, over a decade that you had a console perfect port, or a PC perfect port, basically.
For the most part, except wasn't that when they started altering the med kits because the Red Cross bitched about it, or was that in later ports?
I can't remember if that was the Xbox version of it, or if that was like a later port for something else.
I know that started on the Xbox Live Arcade version on the 360. I can't remember if the Xbox one that came with Doom 3 actually did that. It's
been so long since I've played that version, since I even played the Doom 3 port for the Xbox, that I could really say. But, later versions would mess with the graphics. That's the only downside.
Now, I do have another question. Asking you two esteemed Doom experts here.
Yes.
Do you think it should have even been attempted on the Super NES?
Yeah, I did actually want to yaw about the SNES port a bit. Because I did actually rent that one back in the day. God knows why, because we could run Doom on the PC, but I guess I just felt curious. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was a thing. It was advertised in magazines, but... should it have been attempted is, I mean, that's purely an academic question, but for as, honkingly popular as Doom was, I would say maybe arguably, if not the biggest, then absolutely one of the biggest American-made games in the 90s. I think that arguably it did deserve to spread its tendrils out as far as it could to other systems and mediums, so that other people who didn't really have PCs or weren't PC-centric or didn't have PCs that were strong enough, whatever reason, were not able to play the quote-unquote proper version of Doom on their own. They could at least experience it in some fashion. And I do think that the SNES port, for as iffy as it was a noble attempt to convert the PC version to home console, even if, wow, this is choppier than I remember looking up footage. But hey, it existed.
It's interesting because it doesn't even use the Doom engine. Something about the way the Doom engine works made it a bad fit for so many consoles. It's just the way it handled memory or something, or the way the maps worked. But they actually reprogrammed the engine, and it actually directly uses one of those fancy chips that some carts had on the SNES. I forget which chip, which revision of it too.
It was a version of the Super FX chip, which is probably best known as the chip that powered Star Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and a bunch of others. Although, as much as I liked Star Fox, I was way more interested in the racing game that came out for it, and that one mecha game.
It's not Race FX.
Yes, I forget what the mecha game was called.
Vortex?
I wish I...
that was it, Vortex.
I like when I played a Stunt Race FX, even if I'm not normally a racing game guy, but I always thought that one was pretty cute in its design, and also pretty neat. Did some interesting things. I remember renting it. I wish that I had bought it, but I'm sure it's really rare now. I don't know.
Yeah,
anyway,
hard to say.
But yes, and yes, Doom is on the Switch, Sharon. It is, in fact, Doom is rather infamous for being maybe the most ported game in history, maybe short of Prince of Persia, to the extent that people have gotten to run Doom on increasingly ridiculous and improbable mediums.
This is true.
Like, I think one has been programmed into a toaster, one has been programmed into a pregnancy test, there's been a version of Doom programmed into a sentient colony of bacteria or some fucking crazy bullshit like that.
It runs at like a frame rate that takes thousands of years to render, would take thousands of years to even get to the main menu kind of thing.
Yes, it's fucking nuts and kind of amazing, if I do say so.
So thousands of years from now, Doom will still be being played by a bunch of bacteria.
I mean, if one aspect of human culture holds up, I would be okay if it was Doom. I think it's a very significant game for what it does. Still one of the most popular games ever. One little port that I did want to just quickly shed 30 seconds on. I haven't played it, but I know that the 3DO port of this game is absolute butt. And it's fairly famous for its programmer, Burger Becky Rebecca Heineman, just having had the worst possible conditions to try and port Doom onto the 3DO. She is basically asked to paint a masterpiece with only one color of paint. So,
and here's the thing, she had to do it in 2 weeks or something like that. It's ridiculous the game runs as well as it does. And she would later kind of redeem herself because she would actually handle the PC port of Killing Time, which was originally a 3DO game. So she took a 3DO game, and then as part of that port, they redesigned the engine, and it actually uses some of the code from Doom, I believe. It's very interesting. There was some research done into that recently.
Oh, that's really neat.
Because it's interesting because the 3DO version of Killing Time was more like Wolfenstein 3D, so it was almost a reverse of what happened with Doom. It's so fascinating.
That is pretty neat, although it kind of bears in mind why the 3DO failed. But
just to say something about that real quick, I had unlimited access to a 3DO for some time, and honestly, all I wanted to do was just keep playing Road Rash, because every other game that was there was terrible.
What, you didn't like Way of the Warrior starring Shaky Jake and White Zombie?
I don't even think that one was there, to tell you the truth.
What about PO'd, actually? That was the only other, I think, first-person shooter or really big one for the system.
PO'd, which is now getting a remaster, which is pretty cool.
I know.
I don't think he had that one either. Now, my friend Brenton actually left it with me. He wanted me to go ahead and sell it for him. So, left me that and his stack of games that he had. And so I hooked it up one day. I was like, I've got this thing. Might as well try it out. It's like, all right, Road Rash, try it first. Oh, this is fun. And then, okay, this game sucks. This game sucks. This game sucks. This game sucks. Oh, God. I'm going back to Road Rash.
Sharon, unfortunately, Doom was not brought to the Virtual Boy unless someone actually did make an unofficial port of it that I don't know about. I wouldn't put it past someone actually doing that.
At least the colors are
There's
correct.
an FPS for the system.
What's that?
There's an FPS for the Virtual Boy, at least. It's that, we were just talking about that today. It was Innsmouth no Yakata or something like that.
Yes, that's the one. Really freaking atmospherically cool game. It's sort of like a combination maze game, FPS-ish sort of title, which I don't think I've actually played it, but it's probably the objectively coolest game made for that system, arguably. At least graphically so.
You know, if someone was going to port that to the Virtual Boy, at least it's got the right color scheme for Doom.
Lots of red, yes.
Red.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that there have been a few ports over time that did cause the monsters to bleed green blood. That might have been the Game Boy Advance port, if I'm not mistaken. And
That
yes,
wouldn't surprise
it
me.
Yeah,
got
one of the
those.
ports, it was either Doom or Doom 2 that did that. I think the original might have actually had red blood. Or no, I think the Game Boy Advance ports are so weird because they're actually running on, like, one is the actual Doom engine, and then the other one's a Game Boy Advance exclusive engine that was meant to mimic Doom. It's very weird. That whole... They're good ports, though. Both of them are good for different reasons, but yes, one of them is censored.
Well, at least they don't sweat when you kill them.
Actually, yeah, good point. Fucking Mortal Kombat. I actually wanted to take a little aside and reference, if I can call him, friend of the show, Derek. It's him, Derek. Stop Skeletons from Fighting actually had several videos covering the various Doom official Doom console ports, and I know they touched upon the Game Boy Advance one, but like I said, he has several videos on Doom console ports. I'll just post the first one here you check out, but always love him looking at bizarre ports that had no right existing, but they did the best what they could.
Hey, at least you knew when he appeared you were going to hear plenty about Splatterhouse.
Yes.
4 freaking hours worth.
I'm still very proud of that. Despite the technical hit at the beginning, that turned into a great thing.
Yes, it did. But speaking of which, we're coming up on the 3.5 hour mark.
Yeah,
So,
that is true.
Yes.
If we wanted to close out Snarb, you have anything else to say about Doom?
Doom. It's a game.
Yes, and it is certainly, still a landmark of American culture, and of course it did have a sequel, Doom 2, which kind of towed the line between a full-blown sequel and just a mission pack. I guess the debate on that one still rages on.
It adds like twice as many monsters, Mike. It can't just be an expansion pack with that many monsters. It only adds one new weapon, but it's a hell of a weapon.
Yeah, so good that you have to use it for like 80% of the game. No, I'm just kidding. I love the Super Shotgun. Doom 2 did also get a few ports of its own, but I don't know as much about those, admittedly. But
well, you know,
yeah.
Go ahead, Snarp.
Sorry, the Doom 2, I don't know if it ever got directly ported. The PlayStation port of Doom is actually a melding of Doom and Doom 2, and then there was Final Doom, which was like the 2 Final Doom episodes mixed with the master levels. It's very weird.
Very fucking weird. Yeah, no, that's a really bizarre rabbit hole, and we also somehow got Doom 64 as a completely original game amidst the cyclone of weird ports, but
That one's amazing, by the way.
I love Doom 64, yeah.
I guess the important thing about the Doom games is that they all let you do one thing. You know what that is.
Kill the fuck out of demons.
Paint the walls red.
Sweet Christmas, big mouth floating thingies. It's always something.
Yeah.
Choo-choo boogie.
I had to quote the comic at some point. I'm sorry.
Knee deep in the dead. There, that's the only quote I know.
No, that's a valid one.
Yeah. So that said, we're just going to wrap up here real quick. The progress on the books is again moving forward for everyone who's, didn't hear what I was talking about at the beginning. There will be a Kickstarter being set up to cover publication costs. And when that happens, I will definitely be sharing the link with everybody. I've already gotten a look at the first video, and it's It's definitely a cool little video. Yeah, both myself and Betty narrate it, and you'll laugh when you see what was done to me, but Betty just looks adorable in this.
That sounds cute, whatever it's going to be.
Yep, and we just got to finalize a couple different things on it. As far as different roundtables and streams coming up, we do have now one of the members of this roundtable is having a few medical issues right now, so it's been postponed. But we are planning an assault suits roundtable.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have in the works a graphic adventures roundtable. And there will be further episodes of Dyer's Place as well. So, for anyone who was expecting it last week, sorry about the confusion there, but there was just some stuff going on. We couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So,
Hastings happens. We're flexible, as it were. I'm just glad we got to talk about something that I had a lot to say about for 95% of the games.
Yeah, me, just the ports I knew. That was it.
Hey, you knew a lot more than I thought you would, honestly.
Well, you know, that's... Especially in the case of the Genesis, when you basically get in on the ground floor. You just... When these new games come out, you see them. You may get to play them, rent them, whatever, you know? So that's how I got to experience a lot of them in the first place. That and Bob.
Good old Bob.
Yep.
Bob.
Psycho Bob. That was his nickname. No lie. Psycho Bob.
I do remember that, yeah.
And there'll be a little bit about him and eating candy in outer space. So, anyway, so yeah, it's a little after 12:30 now. We are going to go ahead and sign off. So, thank you everyone who's still here. Thank you everybody who came in the first place. And we appreciate y'all stopping in. So,
yeah. And thank you, Snarb, for being roped into this normally two-man operation. You really contributed a lot to this tonight.
Yeah, you did.
Hey, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, most
that's always the goal. So, again, thank you all for coming, and have a fun.
Enjoy.
Take it easy, everybody.